Man, that countdown went fast, huh? Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Omari Salisbury. I'm your host here tonight, and also joined with the moderators for tonight's historic town hall. I have Besa Gordon from KUBE 93 and Marcus Harrison Green. Always make sure I put that middle name in there. He is the founder of the South Seattle Emerald and also a columnist with the Seattle Times. What's up, y'all?
Hey.
How y'all doing?
How you doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, you look real cute in them headphones, Marcus.
I had to break out the black headphones. I usually do the fuchsia, but for tonight, it's in honor of the event. It's black on black everything. So.
Hey, look, I got the black shirt, so I'm close.
All right. Well, you already know how it goes over here, man. All right. Well, although I like kind of the tone that we have right here, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of relaxed and chill, but a lot of serious issues that we're discussing tonight, you know what I'm saying? And we've got a lot going on. On the community discussion side, we've got King County Council Member Zahalai, King County District number 2. We've got Seattle School Board Director Brandon Hersey from District 7. And of course, we've got in the second hour, King County Equity Now, and a lot of those guys. Then also you got Mayor Durkan and her executive team. And so, man, it's some hitters on the platform tonight.
I'm excited because first of all, can I just mention that it's not going to be like Tuesday? Can we like toss that out there and let it be known that is not what we're doing today? That is not the point of this event. That is not what I envisioned when we put it together. And I just want for people to know, for the record, we are really just trying to make sure that we are knowing what we're doing for the Black community, who's going to do it, what their plan is, why they feel that their plan is going to work. Like, this really isn't about a bunch of bad energy. This is really about solutions and how we can truly move forward.
Yes.
Right. Is that you were saying that, Marcus?
No, I was just going to co-sign every single thing that my co-moderator said. This is about solutions. This is about moving us forward. This isn't about, again, chaos and negativity and all that you saw in another debate town hall forum on Tuesday.
Yeah, that was wild. All right, let me jump into this. I got a few words here in the beginning, man, and usually I'm good for off the cuff, but I got a few written words here I want to be able to share with everybody, and then we're gonna get literally this show on the road. First of all, though, I want to start the evening by acknowledging other Black media outlets in Seattle that set a foundation for Converge Media to stand upon here today. That'd be the Medium newspaper, Z-Twins Radio, the Facts newspaper, Radio Avenue Radio, and of course, the South Seattle Emerald. I'm acknowledging all of you and all that you have done and that you've come before me and that you've allowed Converge Media to be in this moment. I'm ever thankful and grateful to all of you. I also want to thank our partners tonight, iHeartMedia, KUBE 93, neighbors over at Elysian Brewery, Space Dust IPA, and of course, my colleagues at Converge Media, who have all helped bring us together for a conversation of action that's being transmitted not only online, but also live via radio to reach the largest possible audience across our region to help us all learn, engage, and work towards building the Emerald City that we all deserve. We're here tonight, for sure, on a less than perfect platform. We're going into this with our eyes wide open, knowing that at the end of this 3 hours, many of the same problems that plague our city very well will remain. And the gaps between us might not be any closer, although we're hoping. However, what we have here today is a start, a historic start, and an imperfect first step for conversations to start, and for those of us who love the Emerald City dearly to gain sorely needed insights and understanding at this important juncture in our city's history. Tonight, we have the mayor of our city on the same platform as the leading community voices. They will each have an opportunity to speak to you directly, the citizen stakeholders of Seattle, as to their vision for the future. Tonight presents an opportunity for everyone to listen, to learn, to ask some questions, but most importantly, to walk away from tonight's town hall meeting with a better understanding of the dynamics and forces at play that are trying to forge the future of our city. About tonight's format, The first hour, we'll be having a conversation with community members that hold elected positions, that being King County Council member for District 2, Gurmai Zahalai, and Seattle School Board Director for District 7, Brandon Hersey, about the challenges and successes that they are facing at this time. The next 2 hours will be a town hall format in which both King County Equity Now, Africa Town, Choose 180, and others, as well as Mayor Durkan and her executive staff, will both have 1 hour to make their case directly to you, the people of Seattle, and in doing so, share their vision and roadmap for the future. They will also be answering questions submitted by the general public via online, but via online form, as well as social media, and of course, from our moderators, Marcus Green and Besa Gordon. Community will have the first hour, Mayor Durkan will have the second hour. The purpose of this town hall is first and foremost to educate and inform the citizen stakeholders of Seattle who want to learn more about exactly what's going on around the issues of social justice and historic change in our city. Again, let me read this to you again. The purpose of this town hall is first and foremost to educate and inform the citizen stakeholders of Seattle who want to learn more about what exactly is going on around issues of social justice and historic change in our city. I want to encourage those of you who are viewing and in our viewing and listening audience to take this opportunity to listen, learn, and try your best to understand. People who follow me know one of my favorite lines, you guys hear me say it all the time, is we don't have to agree, but let's make a commitment to understand. Those of us who love this Emerald City owe it to ourselves, our neighbors, to raise the bar of civility and humanity in our fair city. Let's hope that that can start here tonight. Again, I want to thank you for joining us here tonight for this historic town hall. And at this point, I will turn it over to your moderators for this evening, Marcus Green, South Seattle Emerald, and Besa Gordon of KUBE 93. Before I forget, let me remind you to share the stream.
Period. Share the stream.
Yeah, share the stream. Man, oh, you should have ended that with Sikanda forever, bro. I was feeling that Black Panther energy today, I gotta say. Anyway.
The show is yours.
All right. Well, Besa, this is such a historic night. It is such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, O, for providing this platform for us and for our community. And I don't know, we are going to have just a wonderful night, a wonderful conversation today.
I really can't say any more than that. Besides, really, that's what we need. Like, I'm watching the comments. Everyone's like, look, this is what we've been needing. This is what we've been waiting for. And I'm so happy to be a part of this moment and literally giving our city the questions and answers that they want. And I'm pretty sure there's people watching all across the nation, and they're probably like, yo, why can't we do this here? Right. So, yeah.
Well, the thing is that they can, right? And they can follow suit with us and Converge, one of the best media outlets in the land. So
well, I appreciate it. And I'll tell you this, if we can now, this is a first step. I know some people, they're ready for celebrity deathmatch. We're not quite there yet. But in Seattle, if we can get people talking in conversations like this, in Seattle, amongst a lot of cities across America, Seattle's probably one of the furthest apart. You know what I'm saying? Considering what's going on. If we can get to talking here, I think, it's conversation that can go all across the country.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we live in a time period where there is just a bombardment of information and not enough truth. And at the end of the day, today, we are just trying to get down to the truth. So, yeah.
There it is.
Ready, honey.
Yeah. Well,
I'll let you guys get to your guest. Who you got?
All right. Well, Marcus, you want to bring him in?
All right, let's do it. We have Brandon Hershey. He is a school board director for District 2 in the Seattle School Board. Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, bro. Just a quick correction. That's District 7, Southeast
District
Seattle.
7. Sorry. My bad, brother. My bad. I had District 2 on my mind. Hey, man,
I hear you.
And then we also have somebody who is, I'll say, near and dear to my heart, because he represents the area of town that I live in Skyway and Lake Ridge, Gramai Zahalai, who represents District 2 in King County. How are you doing today, Councilmember Gramai?
Are you muted?
Brother Gramai, looks like you are muted. Can you unmute for the
My
audience?
bad.
It's all good.
One time for 2020.
All right. I'm sure whatever you said while you were muted, it was just gold.
Oh yeah, I sent positivity to each one of you, showed you some love. I can do it again if you want me to.
well, hey, I want to set the scene, start this off with a question for you all, in the sense that obviously in Seattle we have Seattle and in the county that we're in, King County Council, we have King County Council, we have Seattle City Council, we have the Port Commission of Seattle, and we also have the Seattle School District. Now, the Seattle School Board. Now, out of all of those positions, you are the only 2 Black elected officials. So what type of pressure is that on you to represent our community and do it knowing that our community is not a monolith, obviously?
Brandon, you got it. I know what you've been going through.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And so what I would just say first is that, I mean, the pressure is enormous, right? And I think that, I feel really fortunate coming into the political stage in this area at the same time as Councilmember Zalahai. And one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we did from the jump was make sure that we were as aligned as possible, that we were breaking down silos and barriers between the county and between the school district. And really what we're seeing is a lot of success with that, because as we have more and more younger folks getting involved in electoral office, we're really continuing to break down those barriers of communication that have kept our system from working in the interest of Black communities specifically, but also young folks, people of color. And that has really been one of the driving factors, I know, for me stepping into this role, is really bringing, the community vision that we have, not only as a Black community, to the school district, but how does that intertwine with what's happening at the council, what's happening at the county council, what's happening at the port? One of the things that I'm really thankful for, especially from the leadership of Councilmember Zalahai, is the push toward a participatory budgeting process, not only at the county level, but now that's something that we're exploring at the school district level as well. And so now we're really just trying to figure out, from the perspective, especially as a Black man in this community and as a young Black man, I want to make sure that my tax dollars are going to places that I can see real benefit to the kids that look like me. And the more we can have that happen, not only at the county level, but also at the district level and what have you, the more we're really going to bring our community into the process to make sure that they have true ownership over where those resources and dollars are going.
All right.
I would love, sorry, Marcus, what were you going to say?
That was me. I was going to make fun of Brandon for calling himself a young man.
Oh, man. Younger than you?
Yeah. Are we starting early?
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this real quick. What is something that you are doing to make sure that Black people are properly invested in the communities in your areas and they're not being forgotten, especially during this time in COVID?
Yeah, this connects to Marcus's last question about being the only one of, the only Black person elected, not only at the King County level, but I'm the only Black county council member in the entire state of Washington, only person of color on a county council in the state of Washington. So it makes these issues a lot more personal. One of the communities that I grew up in is Skyway, and now I represent that district. And what I see in Skyway every day, the lack of investment, people struggling, that affects me in a very personal way. And so what have I done for it is, first of all, call it as it is. The lack of investment in Skyway is systemic racism. That's what it is. Skyway has the highest proportion of African Americans in the entire state of Washington. It also happens to be the community that is disinvested in the most. There's no affordable housing being invested there. There aren't barely any King County budget being historically being directed that way. And we have to remind ourselves that systemic racism does not require intent. You do not have to have intent to cause harm to be promoting systemic racism. If you are disinvesting in the neighborhood that has the highest proportion of Black people, that's systemic racism. It's about outcomes. And what we've been able to do, to answer your question, Besa, is elevate this messaging as much as we can. We've been able to write countless articles, hold budget town halls, hold workshops, build with the community that exists there, the people who have already been doing a lot of great work in Skyway for a long time. And for the first time in a generation, we're starting to see the needle move with the executive's proposed budget for Skyway now. $10 million of seed investment for a Skyway community center is coming. $10 million of participatory budgeting for things like capital investments and infrastructure in Skyway. We've seen the executive move $4.6 million of marijuana revenue away from the sheriff's office and toward community-based programs. These are all things that wouldn't happen without community organizing and calling for this for such a long time. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but it's a start, and we're starting to see the needle move.
Can I ask one quick question, like a quick follow-up question?
Yeah.
If you were not in this position, because I feel like Skyway has been literally hungry for this for years, you know, do you feel like this is something that would be happening if you were not in this position to push for all of this, or do you think they would have figured it out eventually?
I think change happens when elected officials partner with community organizers and community organizations in a meaningful and authentic way to build on the work that community has already been doing for a long time, remove the obstacles from them, and also grant them the power to take care of themselves, because they're already taking care of themselves. So all my office did was elevate the voices of people who've already been doing this work for a long time. And so would it happen if we were in this position? I don't know. I can't say. But I think we have been fortunate that my time in office has coincided with the largest uprising of Black voices in the history of this country. And so that has helped push a lot of our agenda across the finish line.
Right. Let me follow up on that a bit, in the sense that, I mean, we already alluded to the fact that Brandon Ingram, you all are, you know, two you are the only two in terms of our elected officials out here, at least at the county and the city level. And so that means that you do have to talk with and sometimes be collegial, obviously, with folks who are a lot of times anti, you know, your platforms and anti, you know, moving the ball forward. How are you able to work with folks, you know, to make sure that you know, our community is advancing? Because, you know, I've lived in Skyway for majority of my life, and I'll tell you, like, I have not seen, you know, this amount of advancement in I'll say my lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure, absolutely. So for me personally, the way that I look at all of my decision making is just point blank. Does this improve the situation for marginalized students, those who we classify as furthest away from educational justice, Black and brown students, or does this perpetuate systemic racism in the school district that we have, right? And honestly, when you boil down every single decision to that question, the answer becomes really, really clear. I think for us in Seattle Public Schools, we have a really bold strategic plan, but a strategic plan is only as good as the policy and the workforce that backs it up. So for me, what that looks like is making sure that we're making sound policy in partnership with our educators, in partnership with our principals, but most importantly, in partnership with our students and our parents. Recently, there was a Black Education Now rally that was held at Rainier Beach over the summer in response to the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and really calling on our entire system to bring forth not only resources, but also give space to our students to give us the tools necessary and to point us in the direction of where we need to be to actually make this an equitable education system. And what that means for us is that, especially, and when I say us, I mean people who are at this theoretical table is we don't just need to continue to invite people to the table unless we're ready to get up and give up our seats at the head of that table when it comes to decision making. And so for me and for other members of our board, the school district is actually quite nimble. Since we only have 7 representatives from across the entire city, you really only need 4 votes to push something through. And I believe with this board that we have right now, we are headed in the direction of working directly with community, actually listening to our students, figuring out how not only do we meet their demands, but how do we do that expeditiously. And I'm really excited to continue that work, and I'm excited for the work that this board still has left to do, because playtime is over. We've seen over the summer that not only during the backdrop of this pandemic, but we're very much so facing dual pandemics. The first one being racism that folks, it seemingly are just now starting to pay attention to. So as a Black board member, the only Black board member and educator on the school board, this timing that we have in this moment is incredibly important. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that we're meeting not only the needs of our students, but especially and specifically the needs of our Black students.
Right. So Brandon, what does that specifically look like, though? Right. I mean, I know, as you alluded to, right. I mean, going through this COVID crisis, I mean, that is just widening the education gap that we have had persistently in Seattle public schools. And we have heard from school board members in the past that, hey, we are going to narrow this gap only for it to either persist or grow wider. So how do we address this specifically?
So there's lots of things that we can talk about that I'm really excited to share with you. So the first thing is that we, over the summer, passed a resolution recommitting our district to the interests and efforts of our Black students. And what that looks like is we removed SEOs, which are student emphasis officers, and student resource officers from public schools, right? And because we know firsthand that Black students are over-policed at ridiculous rates, especially in schools. And so the first step to that is removing a police presence in our schools, because we believe strongly that there are organizations like Choose 180, like Community Passageways, that can give our school system and give our students the support that they need instead of having an armed officer in the building. The next thing that we did was that we just recently passed a student community workforce agreement. And what that means is that when there's a new project that's being built in a neighborhood, for example, Rainier Beach is getting a new high school very shortly. This allows for our students and their families and folks in that neighborhood to be hired onto that project and given priority. And we see that largely as a win for economic justice for our students, because oftentimes we have these major $1 million contracts that come through the school district, but yet there's no access for the communities where those projects are going for students to be able to take part and actually benefit from those projects, right? In addition to that, we've also moved to making sure that we are a one-to-one district, which means that there is an electronic device that is available for every single student in our district so that they can have the connectivity and the basic access to internet that they need to be successful during this time of remote learning. We could go on and on about the few things that we have done in these short months that this current board has been operating. But what I really want to make clear is that this board is focused on community engagement. This is the time that if we are taking ideas that are coming straight from the community, we believe strongly that that is going to create the systems and change that are needed to actually close the achievement and opportunity gap, rather, that we've been talking about for so long. Because we have to have people in the places to actually vote for these progressive policies, like student community workforce agreements, like removing police officers from schools, like ensuring that we have one-to-one devices for every student, that give us the opportunity to actually move the needle on those issues.
Sorry, I was muted, but I concur.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I have another question for you, Brandon, but I'm going to jump over to Gurmai real quick. I have questions about economic integration and what you are currently doing in Skyway to make sure that your residents actually do have some land. I did see something about how you are working with business owners to own a building that was about to get bought out or something like that. So that way it doesn't go to the city, but they actually have some equity.
Yeah, I always think of Skyway as the greatest opportunity that our state has to invest without displacing. If you go to the northern parts of my district, you'll see the Central District, you'll see South Seattle, And what has happened there is just economic tsunami of unchecked, unregulated capitalism wiping people away from the northern parts of my district. And now Skyway is the area that has the highest proportion of Black people in the entire state of Washington. But it's not going to stay that way if we don't act fast. That same economic tidal wave is coming for Skyway next. And that, I'm not going to lie, that keeps me up at night every single night. So what we need to do right now is invest as much as we can in affordable housing, in community ownership of land and property, and also pass the kinds of legislation that are going to keep people housed and homed in Seattle, in Skyway, for as long as they so choose. So one of the things that we're working on right now is the idea of commercial tenants owning their building, because what's going to happen is the moment that speculative real estate developers and realtors start seeing that Skyway is this next spot, they're going to start buying up land, they're going to start buying up property, and that's going to displace the commercial tenants, the small Black business owners who operate there. And so there's one specific building right now that's for sale that we're working aggressively and quickly with the tenants there to see what options we have to help those tenants own that building. Because when you do that and you do it by a building by building basis, you can prevent dozens of small marginalized community Black owned businesses from being displaced, and you can save them for a generation. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on now. Community ownership, commercial tenant, cooperative ownership. These are all models that we all need to focus on.
Well, Omari, and I know that you have definitely talked about this tsunami, this economic tsunami that is coming for Skyway. I was driving through the area the other day, seeing all these for sale signs on homes and everything else, and it looked like it was already here, to be quite honest with you. So what things can we sort of immediately do? And sometimes it seems like we can't wait necessarily for policy and the political, machinations to play out. As I was talking to a Skyway community member yesterday, and they were like, we needed this 8-10 years ago. How do we, drastically put things in place so that we can avoid this economic tsunami that is, is here, is coming, and doesn't seem to be abating?
We need to hold our elected officials accountable. We live in a county with Martin Luther King's face as the symbol. We live in a city of Seattle with Chief Sealth as the flag, but Black people and Indigenous people are doing the worst of anybody in these places. So we can no longer rely on symbolic gestures, performative gestures. We have to hold elected officials accountable to real concrete change, to community ownership, to wealth promotion, to eliminating systemic harm. These are all things that community has been asking for a long time. And now we have the political environment to actually act on these things. So I would encourage everybody listening to this to Google who are your representatives at every single level, at the school board level, city level, county level, state and federal level, and ask them, what are you doing to actually facilitate this new normal rooted in equity that community has been asking for? Because first of all, there is no elected official who on their own can bring about all the changes that they say they're going to bring about. Elected officials on their own can be obstacles and be destructive to a cause, but on their own, they cannot bring about the changes that they are calling for. So we have to collaborate with community that's already doing the work, that's already taking care of itself, eliminate systemic harm, and open doors to resources and direct resources in a way that's equitable and that makes the good work that community's already doing even better.
I agree. Marcus, don't we have a question from Super for Brandon? Or am I wrong?
No, we do. And so Brandon,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask you, as you know, so many people are with everything having to shift online in terms of online learning and so forth for the school year here. So many folks in Black and Brown communities have low rates of online engagement, and there was a recent report in the Seattle Times actually that came out that was saying that there's a widening gap when it comes to education because of online access, as you know. So what tools can we put into place to make sure, right, that there is equal access to education right now, today, that our kids don't fall farther behind?
Absolutely. And first, I just want to say thank you. I've been monitoring the chat as it pops up here. I think that there are a lot of educators from Seattle and beyond in this and really engaging in this process. So I see you and thank you for making the time, because as a second grade teacher myself down in Federal Way, I know that these days just keep getting longer and longer. And I know firsthand that we have a serious issue with engagement in providing the opportunity and the tools necessary for our students to be able to engage, right? So what we as a system need to do is we need to realize that there are things that are within our control and things that we need to have impact on, even though they might be out of our control. And let me explain what I mean by that. Like we talked about earlier, we moved to have one-to-one devices for every student, which was a huge obstacle before because there are so many families that are concerned about screen time for their kid. And what we as a system need to do is we need to stop fearing technology and actually teach our students how to use it effectively, right? Now that we are in a position to where we have the tools that we need to do a better job of communicating the availability of those tools. We need from OSPI to establish a central translation service so that we can actually translate every educational material that comes from any district in our state, to make sure that the folks who need it most, who might not necessarily speak English as a first language, still can participate and feel empowered in their child's educational experience, right? Additionally, we also need to realize that not everyone throughout this pandemic has the luxury to quarantine and to be at home with their children all day, right? So what we need to make sure is that we are providing not only resources available during the school day, but also resources that go outside of the hours of 8 to 3 to ensure that whether your most availability is to connect during the day or asynchronously after school, that we are meeting you where you are at. And what we also need to realize is that we can make all the nice fancy policy at the top, but if that's not necessarily getting down to the grassroots level for our educators and our students, then that is all for naught. And what we have a serious problem systemically in this district is that we do a really great job of bringing people to the table, like I was talking about earlier, asking them for their feedback and then not acting on it, or not actually doing everything that we can to make sure that our teachers and our families, but most importantly, our students feel supported. So what really needs to happen is that we need to hold the principals, directors of schools, our superintendent, chiefs, and especially the school board accountable for ensuring that we're not just making policy for lip service, that this has actual outcomes for our students. And I am really proud to sit on this board as an educator, because my predecessor, Betty Patu, who served for over a decade in this area, was the only educator on the board for a number of years. And I am so excited to continue that legacy, because if we do not have young educators of color in decision-making places within our district, we are going to continue to have an opportunity gap that widens, and Black students will be the ones who lose out here. So really, quite frankly, this is a new day in Seattle Public Schools, and I am looking forward to working closely with our educators who have the closest and best relationships with our students to not only develop policy that is in their interest, but also figure out how do we make procedure possible, right? Because so many of our teachers right now are struggling to not only learn new systems, but to also use them effectively. I know personally that I spent close to 40, 50 hours a week over my summer just making sure that I knew how to use all of the tools properly, right? So that we could provide a better educational experience than what we were able to provide in the spring. And teachers all across this district are doing the same thing, if not more. And so we as a system need to do everything that we can to honor that, to acknowledge that, and to support that. And if we don't, then we are failing every single one of our students.
First and foremost, I don't know where to go from there. Besides to take a question that is coming from our audience, and a big thing I continuously have seen, like, yo, give Brandon a hand to clap, first and foremost. But a big question that people are saying is a lot of students have outdated laptops.
Yep.
And that seems to be, at least from what I'm seeing through these comments, possibly one big reason as to why they're not logging on. So is there a solution for these outdated laptops? I mean, I know me, I grew up in a household where I didn't get my first laptop till college. I didn't get internet until I could pay for it. So it's like, what are we doing for these low-income students that are literally only able to get the laptop that the school provides because their parents doesn't have the money to buy a Mac? Their parents doesn't have the money to get the newest Google Chromebook, and they're sitting here struggling to do their homework or even pay attention to class because maybe the internet's lagging and it's too slow.
Right, absolutely. And one of the big things that we need to do is we need to assess and reprioritize where we are spending our money, right? Because there is so much bloat, I will tell you firsthand, throughout this district, that we focus on ensuring that we have quality technology, but it doesn't just end with laptops. We need to be working directly with the city, with the state, and with the county council to make broadband a public utility. We need to make sure that we are not just succumbing to all of these major companies, because even with the coupons, so right now we have a program where we are handing out coupons, right, for internet access. And those coupons aren't even being honored to the same way that they are being advertised for major companies like Comcast, this, that, and the other. So what we really need to do is take this as a lesson learned, and we all need to build a very serious coalition about what it looks like to have internet access for every single person that lives in this area. Because it's going to take, let's be honest, it's going to take a number of things. It's going to take making sure that we have up-to-date technology. It's going to take making sure that we have access to broadband. And then it's going to also make sure that we have a system in which the barriers to signing up for that broadband are reduced, right? Because it is a hassle for so many families who are working 80-hour weeks with 4 kids at home to find the time to go sign up for a new service, right? So what role can we as elected officials play in breaking down as many of those barriers as possible to making connecting to get what you are entitled to as basic education a priority, right? And that's going to start taking, like we talked about at the beginning, breaking down those communication barriers. The fact that Gurmai and I have a solid relationship to where I could call him and ask him and pick his brain about how do we effectively get this done. That was not present before in a lot of respects. Lots of our school board directors who have been here for a number of years do not have current relationships with city council people, state legislators, the county council. Really, where this all begins is acknowledging the fact that our systems, the way that they are designed, are very broken. And the only way we are going to fix this is with an unyielding solidarity that this community has yet to see. And if we are not prepared to do that, then we are not prepared to seriously talk about or advocate on these issues. And I invite every other elected official in this area to join in this conversation, because if you're not, then you are not effectively serving your constituents.
Understood.
Well, talk that talk, Brandon. Talk that talk.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of talking the talk and walking the talk as well, Brandon, you talked about obviously needing to support our families and those families that are from our most marginalized communities. Now, they always say, there's a saying that there are the marginalized of the marginalized, and I know that there are several families who are dealing with children with mental health needs. How is the school district able to support those folks, and what are y'all doing specifically to make sure those people are supported?
And so we have a number of COVID-19 mental health specific resources that folks have access to, right? But again, there are so many barriers that prevent that access. Not speaking English as a first language, not even knowing that those resources exist, right? So what we are doing, or what I am doing, is I meet weekly with our Seattle Council PTSA, different PTSA representatives throughout the South End, and just real-time problem solving. And what that looks like is that these folks are really plugged into their school community. So what they do is we all come together and they let me know specifically what's working, what's not, and who needs what. And when we have that type of serious and authentic family engagement, real change happens. We had a family that did not even know if we were starting school in a virtual or a remote model, and that is on us. We have to do a better job of connecting directly with our families to figure out what are the resources that they need and what and rather, how are the resources that we're providing working? But most importantly, how are they not? Right? So that's the kind of communication that's necessary to address what you're talking about, is ensuring that we have clear and open two-way communication, not us just feeding information or reporting information, but rather going to our communities, looking for authentic feedback, showing up ready to listen, and then also being prepared to act.
These comments is lit. Let me tell you that. These comments is lit. Ramai, what do you think about the best way to make sure that in all low income places, students have something to do? Is that like something that could happen for all low income areas in Seattle, or is that really something that each community has to like truly push for?
That's something that we can absolutely do in King County broadly. Basically, I think I told you this before, but I grew up in both South Seattle and in Skyway. My childhood was spent in South Seattle in places like Rainier Vista and Holly Park. And then my teenage years, while I was going to Franklin, I lived in Skyway. And the difference between the two was stark. Already, South Seattle is an under-resourced area, but you can't even compare it to what it was like in Skyway. When I was in Holly Park and Rainier Vista, yes, it was an under-resourced neighborhood, but at least we had community centers in walking distance. At least there were basketball courts that I could go and play at. At least there were after-school programs. When we moved to Skyway, just a few blocks south, or maybe a couple miles south, there's no community center. There's one very infrequent bus line. It was actually super damaging to us emotionally, and my siblings and I talk about it all the time, to not have anything to do to engage us. And then I know some people are out there saying, where were your parents? Why didn't your parents do? Well, we live in a system where my single parent had to work 3 jobs all at once to take care of us. That's what it took to pay basic rent, 3 jobs. And she wasn't home, and we didn't have things to do after school. And that's really what we're dealing with. And then people wonder why young people in our region do activities and things that we don't want them to do. It's because we haven't invested in them enough. These are structural barriers. This is systemic disinvestment from neighborhoods, and it is by race. I spoke earlier about it does not have to have intent to do harm to be systemic racism. Systemic racism is about outcomes. And so what we need to do is walk the walk. You know, Marcus, you just said that phrase, you have to walk the talk. We have a county that uses equity and social framework as our equity and social justice as our framework for doing things. And yet the community that has maybe the highest equity social justice score by our own metrics is the area where kids don't have things to do. Kids have to hang out in parking lots because they don't have community centers, because they don't have a basketball court, because they don't have things to do. And so we should take our equity framework, actually walk the walk, put the investments in the right place, and support the community organizations that are already doing incredible things on a shoestring budget. So that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Well, Grandma, following on that track, I know that you're well aware that there had been an uptick in gun violence in South King County and South Seattle over the summertime. Obviously, I know there's a saying that jobs and activity stops bullets. And as you alluded to, when you were growing up, right, there needed to be things and activities for our young folks to do. So obviously there is going to be money in this budget to hopefully have a community center in Skyway. I know that I want to say they've been talking about that for the last 2 decades, and hopefully that will actually materialize. But if it does, what does that actually look like in terms of community centers, right? I mean, there's community centers and then there's community centers. So how would this one be different than just putting up a structure? There's a couple of halls in there, or a place that you can, have a community meeting, and that's it. Like, how is it actually resourced in a way that it fits the needs of the community of Skyway?
It all goes to what the community has been asking for. We have a community needs list where Skyway residents have been incorporating what they want to see in a community center and in their neighborhood broadly. They've also written 100 times over for years and years and years what they specifically need in their community. So it really is just King County and the state of Washington putting the resources in the right place and removing the barriers to accomplishing exactly what kind of needs the community has. I would say that it should be somewhere that's walking distance in the areas that already have commercial and social activity, you know, by the Skyway Library, by grocery outlet, by all these places that are already hubs for activity. I think that's where a community, those areas are where a community center should be. But your question more broadly about public safety, Marcus, I've been wanting to bring this up with you, but today you wrote in the Seattle Times probably one of the single most powerful articles I've ever read in my life. And I'm not saying that to exaggerate. And I see how many people have been sharing it. And I think most people feel that way as well. It was truly one of the most powerful articles I've ever read. And for you to be that vulnerable and share such a personal story to advance the cause of having a better system of public safety, that just thank you for doing that. And we have an opportunity to fulfill the vision that you laid out in that article, right? Right now we have a system where we send armed police officers to respond to basically every challenge that we see on the street, on our streets. That is an ineffective way of promoting public safety, and it actually causes a lot of harm. Just like you described, Marcus, you said that you were afraid that in your moment of need, when you needed support, that somebody would come and actually do the complete opposite, cause trauma to you and your mother who was there with you. And so what we need is to move away from that system and transfer public safety functions away from that system and to a diverse toolkit of public health and community-based alternatives. We can't do that right now in King County because we have charter and constitutional prohibitions to what the King County Council can do in terms of public safety and law enforcement. But if people vote yes on Charter Amendment number 6 this November, that would remove those prohibitions and allow King County Council to make those kinds of changes, to transfer public safety functions away from traditional law enforcement and toward community-based and public health alternatives. Again, if people vote yes on Charter Amendment 6, because people like you shouldn't live in fear, Marcus, because of something that's out of your control. That's something that if our systems were better, that you would feel safe calling 911 for. You should not have to call an Uber because you don't feel safe calling 911.
Right. Well, Omari, I gotta have you to be my hype man just at all times, I suppose, for all my articles. No, but seriously, thank you for that. People can also read that in the South Seattle Emerald tomorrow without a paywall. But yeah, thank you for everybody who did read that. All that being said, I want to ask you what gives you hope in this moment now? And I say that, I think I speak for everybody who is listening, who is watching right now, when I say this is a time period where there seems to be a lot of grief and grimness piling up locally and nationally. What continues to give you hope and continues to have you all move forward?
Yeah, man. My second graders, honestly, you know, they're going from being able to spend every day with my group of 8-year-olds and just exposing them to all of the amazing things that are in the world, space, science, math, reading, all the fantastic literature that exists, to only being able to interact with them throughout the majority of the past year through a screen has been a challenge, you know, and it's a pain that not only teachers but families throughout this area and throughout this nation are feeling, right? But logging in and seeing those faces every single day, that they are so resilient, even in the midst of an incredibly broken system that we are handing them, that gives me hope that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and it is our youth, right? The organizers of the Black Education Now rally, the organizers from Black and Brown Lives Matter, the organizers that clearly showed us throughout this summer that the youth right now are the truth right now, and they have the answers, and they've had the answers all along, and all we need to do is get out of the way and implement those answers. That is the type of society that I want to live in, and that is the type of society that I want to be a part of creating. And so when you talk about hope, man, look at all of the amazing things our kids are doing. Look at all of the amazing things that they are showing us day in and day out. And so that is where I go for when I need my uplift, is just seeing how resilient and how focused and how ready our youth are, even in this incredibly messed up system that we have handed them. And I would just encourage anyone else to do the same, because those babies are our future. And if we are not doing every single thing that we can do to support them, whether it be in school, whether it be in the development of a community center, whether it be defunding the police to the actual limit that they called for, then we need to seriously assess what type of society do we want to live in and be a part of, because that's not the type of society that I want to work with. I want to work with a group of folks in a community that is focused on bringing the most marginalized peoples to the forefront of decision making in power, so that we can actually build a system that we can be proud of, not one that is steeped in inequity and systemic racism.
Man, Brandon, do you got a teleprompter, bro? Is that just really? Okay, I'm just checking. I ain't trying to fake. I ain't trying to fake the funk on nobody. So I'm just trying. Great. My same question for you, sir.
Whoa.
This man said the youth right now are the truth right now. That is bars for days. So I'm gonna put that one in my back. No, that was really good. Basil, what's going on?
Yo, the biggest bird just landed on my window.
Bruh.
That's hope. That's
hope. That's a good omen.
I wanted no part.
In ancient Kush society, that would have been, yeah, that's a great omen. That's a great omen. So anyhow, but Councilmember Gamai, yeah.
For all the grief and sorrow and tragedy that you described, Marcus, the same level and the same magnitude of hope has happened at the exact same time in response to those negative things. And that's what gives me hope. We have been able to see the largest movement in American history rise up against these harmful systems. We've been able to see countless coalitions forming against harmful systems. We've been able to see our youth marching in the streets nonstop, putting life and limb on the line for change. These are the most hopeful things that you could ever ask for. And the impact of that is even more hopeful, because the actions of these organizers and these young people have created the political environment to pass things that would have never, ever been possible even 7-8 months ago. Like we're truly living in a different world right now because of the action that our organizers and youth have been taking to create the political environment for us to do this. So that's what gives me hope. And then you look at the fact that so many different coalitions have formed in response to these harmful things that have been happening. It shows that we are all we have. We are sticking together more so than ever. We're seeing cross-racial, cross-generational coalitions and organizing and marching more than I've ever seen in my entire life. We've seen King County Equity Now form. We've seen Decrim Seattle form. We've seen Partners in Change form. We've seen the Skyway Tukwila Coalition form. People are really coming together because they understand if we don't fight for each other, we are going to lose. And it's going to result in Black and brown people dying disproportionately. And that this awakening nationally that's happening, I can't help but feel anything other than hope.
Hey, Sean. Of course, we're talking in production now. Do we have that question that Supa gave for Brandon? Maybe, just maybe.
Hey, what's up? It's DJ Super Sam, KUBE 93.3. My question is for Mr. Brandon Hersey, Director of the Seattle School Board for District 7. Now, as a parent myself during this COVID era, I wanted to ask this particular listener question. Is the city of Seattle considering some type of reform education program to integrate in public schools regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, refugees, social justice, immigration, etc.?
Yeah, so I need a little bit more clarity. Are we talking about like reintegrating like curriculum around those things? I just want to make sure that I understand.
Let's run with curriculum, because I know that a lot of people do have questions about like LGBTQ being included in curriculum, but Black lives are in just like really true Black history is not being included.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first, there are a couple of things that we're doing, right? So 3 years ago, the Seattle School Board unanimously passed a resolution saying that we wanted to develop an ethnic studies curriculum. And we have not been able to deliver on that promise. We have actually fallen quite short of being able to do that. And I'm really thankful that, you know, in the wake of our shortcomings with that, Washington Ethnic Studies now, under the leadership of Tracy Castro-Gill, has been formed. I think that where we really need to be as a district in order to move forward and make sure that we are not only developing curriculum, but also preparing our educators to deliver that curriculum. Because what I know firsthand as a teacher is that curriculum is great, but if you don't have a workforce that knows how to deliver culturally competent curriculum, you're actually going to conduct and do more harm. And we need to make sure that we avoid that at all costs. One of the tenets of that resolution that I mentioned earlier, recommitting ourselves to our Black students, directs our superintendent specifically to start developing a curriculum specifically focused around Black studies. And my intent is to have that curriculum be focused right here in Seattle and developed by the community organizers and all of the various organizations that council members I just mentioned that have been doing work in this area for decades. So I'm not really interested in purchasing some curriculum. I think that it needs to be developed by the community leaders and our educators who are doing this work every day. But then also we need to have an accountability system within our school district that gives us very clear parameters that, like, if you are not capable or if you are choosing not to deliver curriculum in a culturally competent way, then you need to find somewhere else to teach. We need to do everything in our power if we are going to move in this direction, because it's one thing to develop a resource, it's another thing to hold people accountable to it. So yes, we are developing curriculum, but that's only a very small part of the entire conversation. We need to rethink what the word accountability means in our school system, and we need to have a way that we can track and hold every part of our system accountable to doing just that.
All right.
Answered my question.
Yes. Well, I know that we are coming to the finish line, unfortunately, but wanted to give you all the floor just for 1 minute a piece to talk to the folks who are listening today, who are watching today. What is the most important thing that they can do between now and next year in order to affect change in their community?
Vote. I don't need a minute.
Vote and support your local organizers, because they are really doing the work to create the environment for us to do some phenomenal things in King County and Seattle. I'm sure if you go to Instagram pages of King County Equity Now, Decrim Seattle, COVID-19 Mutual Aid, these are all places where really important organizers are doing the work every single day to take care of our community and to hold elected officials accountable. So vote and support the people who are holding the people that you voted accountable.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
and before we get out of here, I just want to thank y'all, honestly. Like, every time I come into spaces, especially with all of this magnificent melanin, I leave so excited to go back to my classroom and go back to my role as a school board director. This has been uplifting for me as well. And just to see so many participants in the chat, like, much love to y'all, because we really need to be coming together in ways like this more often, especially as a Black community right now, because this has done wonders for my mental health. And I really just, again, want to appreciate Converge, iHeartMedia, and all of the South Seattle Emerald and all of the other organizations that came together to make this possible, because this is what I needed today, for real, for real.
And can I give a quick shout out to? I want to shout out 3 people really quickly. Number one, Marcus, I already gave you your love, that article you wrote today, and the way that you continue to put out really important stories representing the South End, my home. We really appreciate you. Besa, I grew up listening to KUBE 93. What you've been doing to really use this platform to advance really positive changes in our community has been amazing to see. You've been out there talking about the census, talking about voting, talking about supporting really important issues, using KUBE like that. Thank you for doing that. And then last but not least, of course, Omari, what he's been able to do during this time of chaos and crisis to really elevate important voices and be on the ground reporting the facts with no spin. You got to appreciate that and show mad love and respect.
Most
Yeah.
Period.
Well, I don't know if we have any Black superhero theme music to go out with, but it's in my head. It's playing in my head right now.
Man, I got Black is King playing in the background somewhere.
Hey, turn that up.
Shout out to Beyonce.
All right. Well, just thank you so much, both of you, again, for being on, and you continue to wish you all good fortune in all that you do. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
See y'all later.
Peace and love, y'all.
Take care.
That was lit.
That was all right. Even with the bird making a cameo, that was cool.
Yo, the bird scared the crap out of me, y'all. They jump on my window, and those birds, they like to go into building windows, and it was like that big.
You handled it well, though. Anything is bound to happen. We live, so that's how we do it.
Everybody would just see it. What up, Bob?
Yeah, you know, it was crazy because the Urban Ace is live tweeting, and the Urban Ace, he put an emoji up there of a bird, and it was like basically just got scared by a bird. So like he's live tweeting all this serious stuff. Remark says this, Hershey says that, and then there's an emoji, and it's like, hey, here's a bird. Hey,
I just want to say I love how you come in and you drop in. It's like Star Wars, bro. You just drop in like Yoda.
I'm not gonna front. It scared the crap out of me.
Hey, I'm using the Force. Let me tell you something, though, man. You know, I mean, clearly this is a big platform tonight. You know what I'm saying? We partnered up really with America's biggest media company in Clear Channel, and you know, we're live on the radio on 2 radio stations here, so it's a big platform tonight. So if you're a politician or a message, this is a great night to be here on the platform. But let me tell you something about Director Hersey and Council Member Zahalai. When Converge had a little itty bitty studio, and we, you know what I'm saying, had a viewership that was tiny compared to our viewership now, I'd call Council Member Zahalai and say, hey, can you come by my show? Can I talk? He'd come every single time. I'd call Council Member Hersey. He would come. And when COVID came about, and that's when we started the Morning Update show, right, to get information out to the community about COVID. I mean, I would call, these guys would come. They would come. I was like, man, we need to tell the community, what's the county doing about COVID? Council Member Zahalai would show up. I'd say, Director Hersey, we got all these kids over here. What's going on with COVID in Seattle Public Schools? He would show up. So, you know, these are guys, yeah, it's a big platform tonight. It was great that they're here, but I just want to let our viewing and listening audience know that it's consistent in their nature to show up.
Period. I've definitely called Gurmai like a few random times, like, yo, can you like just hit me up so we can talk about the census, you know, what's going on here? And he's always like, yeah, man, so it's good. You know, it's not like a problem. And that's what we need more of in our communities, like down on the ground people that can get to the community.
Yes. Well, whether it's 5 or 5,000, both those cats are there. So yes.
Well, it's good stuff. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we're prepping for hour number 2, and that's community. And man, I can see in the waiting room right now, it's a lot of heavy hitters back there from community, man, representing all kinds of aspects of what's going on. So we'll take a short break right now. We'll be right back with the historic town hall.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you.
Our friends at Elysian have us here today for what they call an open mic. Social injustice and the issues we have in this country, it's there again, but I guess it's because it never went away. Like
exactly. I think although the pandemic, obviously nobody wants to experience what we're going through right now with all the different changes and whatnot, and with the protocols and whatever. But I think the one positive thing from this pandemic is that no one really has an excuse anymore, right? You have the excuse of going to work. You know, you can thumb through Twitter, Instagram, check your phone, like, oh man, that's crazy. And then you're driving to work, you're dropping the kids off, you're doing all these different things. This pandemic put us all at a standstill. Now we all have to pay attention. We all have to listen to a lot of the things that, honestly, just like you just said, people have been talking about forever. But now is the time for us to kind of make a change, and everybody has to kind of sit and live with it and understand that, hey, you know, it's crazy out here a little bit for some people. And you know, again, having these dialogues, I think is huge.
Definitely having these dialogues here is huge. A lot of good takeaways, you know what I'm saying, from this last hour right there with Council Member Zahalai and Director Hersey. Man, I ain't know, man, Director Hersey, his disposition tonight matched that shirt, huh? It was it was loud out here. Huh?
You could hear it from a mile away, bro. He was definitely coming correct today. He was not being demure whatsoever. So,
but tell me that's not what the community needs. I really feel like the beauty of this whole platform that we have right now, I think everybody has a lot of questions, but we have everyone on like a very down to earth platform to where things are able to finally be explained in a way that everyone can understand without having to constantly be like, hey Siri, what does this mean?
Well, and people want the real. They're tired of platitudes all the time, and you know, and this quote here and there. I mean, people want the real, and I mean, again, it's outlets like this and platforms like this that exist to give them that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what it's here for. You know, this is the second hour. This is the community hour here, and you know, it started off with the initial list that we had circulated, and even on the flyer, and these were the people representing are the people that, of course, the groups we reached out to that they submitted. But tonight, it's a broad kind of spectrum coming over on the community side. You know, of course, there's Nikita Oliver, K.Y. King Garrett of Africatown, and you know they're gonna go more into it. I know you'll do an official introduction, but there's Sean Glaze, and we've actually played a lot of clips of Sean Glaze on the Morning Update show and talked to Sean Glaze a lot. And Sean Glaze is the CEO of Inclusive Data. So that's the data miner over there. Amijah Smith, who's with Village of Hope. We've also had Amijah on the show, Colorful Communities, and that rally that Brandon Hersey talked about, Black Education Now, actually interviewed Amijah about that. Jalen Scott, Executive Director, Black Trans Task Force. Sean Good, we played a clip from Sean Good this morning. Sean Good was, you know, he was asked to be on the mayor's task force. That's a whole nother story. But Choose 180. So, you know, this is a pretty broad-based group that's coming in here. You know, of course, Nikita Oliver and White King, these are the people, you know, well known throughout the city. But this got some hitters over here.
Period.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's about time for us to get it. What time is it? 7:08. I think it's about time. Let me check these notes over here real quick. You know, Matt gave us a million marching orders on this playlist over here. But yeah, and if everybody I think is in the waiting room, what are some of the things real quick? And I'll hop out of here and let you guys take it. What are some of the things you guys are hoping to hear from community?
Man, I just want to hear about the process, the work that they're doing, you know, specifically how they're going to go about getting some of these ideas implemented and how we can push forward.
I'm not going to front. I kind of want to know if they've had a chance to check out what the mayor dropped today. And I want to know if it coincides with what they already have planned. Because I did get a question from someone that said, why did she not do this sooner? So I'm definitely curious to know what they think about that, if they've gotten a chance to check that out.
All right. And so before I pop out of here, let's let everybody know what's getting ready to happen. So basically, our moderators here, they're going to introduce, I believe, Nikita Oliver, and Nikita is then going to basically introduce all the different people. It's about 5 or 6 different people, some of the people's names I read off here, that are doing small presentations as to everything from the community side. So basically, it's going to go over to you guys, then it'll go to Nikita, and then Nikita is going to be introducing the different people over there. And then once they're done with those presentations, then Marcus and Basa are going to come back for question and answer. So with that being said, my dear moderators, the floor is yours.
All right.
So from what I've been told, this is going to be a nice one because if I'm not mistaken, King County Equity Now and Africatown has a nice little presentation for us for what they actually plan on doing. And then we are going to be able to ask Nikita Oliver and Wykin Garrett a few questions about the exact details of their plans, if you will.
Right. They're taking us to school today.
Period. First and foremost, I would love to speak and say that Nikita Oliver is someone that I've personally been watching from a distance online and just watching her movement. I don't know about anyone else. If you've seen Nikita speak, you know that the words that Nikita exudes are very powerful, and they will sometimes be like, damn, sis, I wasn't ready for that. But they're never, I get to find something that she necessarily says where I'm like, girl, that's out of pocket. Sometimes it's just like, maybe I wasn't ready to hear that, but it's typically things you need to hear. Nikita has been a part of a lot of grassroots things that have gone on, and at one point she actually ran against the mayor. So it is, for me, very important to have Nikita on this panel to speak about, you know, injustice, to speak about equity, to speak about what we need to do to move community forward and what Nikita actually has planned for us. Or shall I say the same?
Yes.
Peace. Wow.
Hey.
So good to see y'all. I'm so excited to be here for this historic town hall with y'all and your amazing, you know, facilitating of this discussion. Thank you for everything that you brought forward with Councilmember Zahalai and Director Hersey. That was a really great discussion to hear from 2 Black electeds, Black community members doing the work at a different level. So thank you so much for having us today.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And Nikita, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Mama Green just texted me and she said that she would beat my butt if I did not tell you that she has mad respect for you and that you are that you are the Angela Davis of Seattle to her. So I told her, I would tell her online, I do not want to get my butt beat. So there you go. That's that. Mama, I did it for you.
Green. Thank you. Thank you, Mama Green. Thank you. That's a good way to start this conversation.
Well, we will cede the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, community, peace and good evening. Very excited to share space with you all and with so many incredible organizers doing dynamic work. As is important, I want to start first by acknowledging we are on Duwamish land in the coastal Salish territories, and that Black liberation and Native sovereignty are inextricably interconnected, and that our solidarity and our accomplishment with our Native relatives has to move beyond land acknowledgements to action. So I really encourage folks, if you are able, to please go look at the Real Rent campaign to support the Duwamish Longhouse. And if you want to take your solidarity to the next step, the Duwamish Longhouse is looking to build a crosswalk between the Longhouse and the waterway so that when young people and visitors come, they're able to also go see the water, which is an important cultural space for understanding our Duwamish relatives and understanding the culture and the space. So thank you to our Native relatives who have shown us what it means to be water protectors, to be earth protectors. And I want to say that we stand in solidarity and accompliceship with you and want to see our actions meet those land acknowledgements. King County Equity Now is a Black-led coalition. We are community organizers, educators, attorneys, artists, bus drivers. We work in the service industry. We are in the public sector, in the corporate sector. And right now, as we do this organizing to build King County Equity Now, we are doing the work of the city in our free time and our volunteer time and the time with our families because we know that our lives and our community's life depends on it. We are doing the work of centering the brilliant solutions of Black peoples, because we know that when those most affected by an issue at the center of the solution building, our entire city will benefit. Today, rather than just hearing from Y. King, Garrett, and I, who were on the advertisement, we wanted to have our team of experts share with you our vision, the work we are already doing and the work we will be doing to build a more equitable Seattle for everyone, because we know that when Black lives finally matter, then all lives will matter. We are in the midst of 4 crises. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, a human rights, racial justice uprising, an ecological crisis, and an economic depression. And these crises demand that we face them head on and that we do not go back to the status quo. We have to do the work of ending white supremacy. We have to do the work of uprooting anti-Black racism. We have to address economic justice and racial injustice, because we know that we cannot have one without the other. Economic justice and racial justice go hand in hand, and we must dismantle racialized capitalism and respond immediately to the climate crisis that will inevitably harm all of us if we do not do something about it. So as we talk about during this time of going to a new normal, we have to have a new normal that is rooted in equity, a new normal which is willing to face the historical and present day anti-Black racism in our region, a new normal which acknowledges that we are not reimagining public safety or police, but rather we are imagining safety for the very first time, because Black communities and Native communities have never been safe in this country. We need to acknowledge that in the midst of this movement, and as electeds attempt to respond with task forces full of cherry-picked people that are being led by white wealthy electeds, trying to address the needs of Black and brown communities, that this is not new, that type of way of moving is the status quo normal that we are unwilling to go back to. Today, during this town hall, our goal is to inspire folks to embrace a new normal that is rooted, deeply rooted in equity, which prioritizes Black brilliance, prioritizes divesting from harmful racist systems, prioritizes investing in Black communities and Black ideas and Black solutions, and prioritizes community-led, community-centered, community-driven solutions. So without further ado, I would rather invite our experts to speak with you. And first, we have Sean Glaze. Sean has over 10 years of experience doing collaborative research towards policy change at the local, state, and national levels. They've worked to influence changes in policies for construction jobs, transportation, education, health, and so much more. Sean's adamant that inclusive data, robust research, and equitable decision-making is essential to creating the world we need. Sean is leading a team of brilliant, and I mean brilliant, Black community researchers to amplify our community voice in new and dynamic ways, which does not rely on the Seattle process of task forces of cherry-picked people by white wealthy people who already have access to political power, but instead, we want to place community power and the voices of those who are most impacted by failed racist systems at the center of our solution building. Sean, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you for all of the incredible work that you're doing to move forward, not just defunding racist public safety systems, but more importantly, investing in our communities so we actually can be truly safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikita. And thank you everyone that's listening today. And thank you to our community researchers out there. I think one of the things that's really important to start with is we have been working on this. Community has been advocating for ourselves for so long. We've been passing down intergenerational wisdom from generation to generation. We can imagine a better world because we've been doing this work for so very long. Our ancestors, our elders, our youth, marching every single day and night, have given us the important data, important stories, important analyses necessary to do this work well. They guide us, they lead the way. That pre-work is what gives us the tools to launch the Black Brilliance Project, and that's the project that I'm going to be speaking about during my time today. The Black Brilliance Research Project's about, it's a robust deep dive into what creates true community safety, true community health. It's about what creates the conditions for us to thrive. And what's important to remember is that This research is about creating and building a better world, because while there's so many tools at our disposal and things we want to say, things we want to do, we always want to connect that insight to specific ways, levers to create a sustained change. When I talk to Black people about this project, when I talk to Black people about the world we want to see, everybody's adamant that it's not just our brilliance alone that's going to get us there. It's going to be connecting it to something tangible, something real, to dollars, to policy. And that's why we do this. It's not about coming up with some like ineffective recommendations, some just, empty talk. It's about tying community voice to actual effective change. And so as we are working together with this Black Brilliance Research Project, one of the big levers that we are pulling to create that change is something that people have been talking about the earlier part of the show, that participatory budgeting, that way that for community voice to turn into actual dollars, to set the priorities, to set the path forward. That's a big part of what this research is about. Allowing community voice and community power to be at the center of this work, creating the solutions and getting us there to where we need to be. So we want to make sure that as we are building that process, as we are building that path towards the world we want to see, that it is rooted in equity. We want to make sure that the budget reflects that these new policies that will be created reflect that. And this Black Brilliance Research Project is already starting to set the stage. So then in this next stage of the research, the paid researcher stage, because we had a lot of unpaid labor this year, this paid research stage, researchers have wasted no time. Our researchers span generations, ethnicities, nationalities, languages, genders, disability experiences, statistical and storytelling skills, class backgrounds. I'm telling you, Black folks, we are not a monolith, and our community of Black community researchers reflect that diversity. Different experiences with incarceration, different experiences with the policing system. We don't all agree all the time, and that's like one of the greatest things is to be able to bring full Black brilliance to this work. We've hosted community meetings. We've started interviewing. We've launched a community needs survey. And as part of my time together, I think I'd just like highlight a few key points. One is that in our community needs survey, we ask about skills, because we want to connect people to paid and unpaid opportunities that interest them. We ask about needs because we want to connect people to access things like masks and food and internet and childcare and disability supports, the things we know that people need in order to be able to do this work well. We also ask people what they would do if they had $200 million that they could invest. And if you're interested in learning more about the needs survey, of course, you can always check it out on bit.ly/WeNeed2020. But honestly, just to highlight some of the things we're hearing so far, people are very good at producing very nuanced answers, right? Because they don't work and live in silos. They don't live single issue lives. When you talk to Black folks, we can tell you about just the shape of a problem in ways that are very specific and very urgent and are necessary to be able to create true solutions to the problems that we see. I will tell you, like, I know I need to hand this off pretty soon, but one of the important things to remember is that within our diversity, many Black communities speak urgently for the need to create new systems, not just new ways to cope with existing injustice, but new systems. We need new ways of deciding how money is allocated. We need new ways of structuring society so that it's actually a place where we can grow and thrive and be safe and healthy. And during Q&A time, I'm happy to go into that in more detail, but it really boils down to making sure that we are highlighting community voice and community power as we help to build the world that we need to be able to thrive. That's what I have for today. I'm just really excited. Everyone working together, I know that we have the power to imagine and create a way where the people, we the people, get to decide how our money gets spent to improve our lives and our communities. And that this democratic participatory budgeting process, that we are creating and refining is a way to create a new normal rooted in equity. And this is just really exciting and innovative work. Thanks, Nikita.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I just really want to highlight that Sean has been at the forefront of developing a Black-led, community-based participatory research process, which is deeply informing the ways in which we're moving, will continue to deeply inform not just the divestment from SPD, but more importantly, the investment in community in a way that community has never really had a voice in how those dollars get spent and how they move through our community. It is a very dynamic process. So if you haven't had a chance, go watch the podcast that are on King County Equity Now to learn more about this really dynamic, very innovative research. Black community is not a monolith. We are intersectional. We have varying needs, histories, cultures, and experiences, which all must have an opportunity to inform our overall approach to equity in our region. The crisis of COVID-19 has exposed and exacerbated the pre-existing condition of racial injustice in the healthcare system that, to be honest, Black people already knew about, but many people are now seeing, as well as our failure to create a world that works for Black people with different abilities. Christiana Obe Sumner is a Black disability justice advocate whose prolific work is transforming the way that we approach health and disability justice for Black peoples in our region. And they're going to speak to us about how can we actually be building a King County that honors the many intersections and the many ways that we need to be able to live our lives.
Hello, everyone. Oh, my cam is super, that's okay. I'll just come up. Hello, my name is Christiana Obi Sumner. My pronouns are they, them. And let me introduce myself. I'm sorry that my camera is super blurry. I am a CEO and founder of Epiphanies of Equity, LLC. I am a community organizer. I am Black and Indigenous. I am disabled. I'm autistic. And I come from a family that not only has experienced consistent policing that has led to the institutionalization and brutalization of their body minds, but also has died at the space of that. And my story is not dissimilar. This entire situation as a daughter of Black Panther, coming from a family that has fought for racial justice, this is not new to me. And so when I see another hashtag or I hear another story of a Black person being brutalized or murdered in the 600-year genocide, nothing hit me as hard as Breonna Taylor's death. And why, might you ask? Because for 6 years, I spent my life, my teens and my young adulthood being involuntarily institutionalized. I share this not to comment on what may be needed for some folks who need to have the help that they need. What I am saying is when your very being is criminalized and pathologized, and then policed by every aspect of the system. When junior year came, and between the guidance counselor and the DARE officer, they continued to have negative talk screens. It then went to psychiatric inpatient floors, which then when I went to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was for 6 months, there was a thing called a mental inquest warrant, where people could say, for whatever reason, that you were a danger to yourself or others or property, which would require the police to come to your house and put you under a mandatory 72-hour hold, to which a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist alone, was the person who had the sole oversight to allow you to leave. And so it first started that I was held for a couple days, and then a couple weeks, and then a couple months. I was then required to be policed in ways that if I didn't comply, I would be put back in again. What a lot of people don't know about me is how I ended up in Seattle was through a sort of agreement of work release to if I was organized enough that I could perhaps go through a program, which is how I came here to escape that system. To this day, when I hear a loud bang at 2 or 3 in the morning, I fear that again, it is the police coming, knocking down, banging down my door, my mom asking them what has happened, trying to step in front of them to drag me off again. I could have also had a similar fate as Breonna Taylor, who lived in West Louisville, only some 5 miles away from where I lived for 6 years. Through the lines of criminalization, when looking at survival as a Black disabled person, you see the lines of crimes and poverty. How do you survive? How do you work within a system that is created and meant to kill you, to oppress you, to restrain you? And not just police and having constant barriers placed by policing, but policing through administrative violence, through social work, through environmental restrictions. There's so much that this entire system and history of policing has morphed into in creating into more and more shape-shifting creatures of oppression, everything from fugitive slave policing to sundown laws to the Social Security Act categorically crowding us out, and the Civil Rights Act that's only 56 years ago, 56. The president of this country was 19 years old. You cannot say this is a historical issue. It is a contemporary issue. It's living memory. There is no such thing in this moment, in this movement, in this master class of inequity that we will be imagining any safety for the first time. No one's reimagining public safety. There is nothing about policing that brings equity. Policing of all types, of our body minds, of our homes, of our children, of our work, of our stories, of our history, of our impact, of our spirit, of our lives. We truly need to amplify the voices and the narratives of those whose calls to action has only compounded since the beginning of Black Lives Matter with Trayvon Martin in 2012, since the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, since. Demand is to divest from policing by 50% minimum, not $100 million, no okie doke here, 50% minimum. That's the bottom line. My mom used to say there are things that people are and things that people do. And I have learned this is also the equation for integrity. Integrity is about having parity and synergy in who it is that you say you are and what it is that you say that you do. We live in a city that professes equity and social justice, and that they listen to community, and that they bring opportunities for those who have been least listened to be amplified, that they're going to create some task force, some community process, some law, some breadcrumb, some okie doke, some carrot on a stick. But when it comes to impacts and outcomes, obviously, something is falling short. We have the data to prove that. One of the things I say is there's only really 4 options right now. You can either commit to this work and everything that it means, the energy that it takes, the pain that it's going to be, how laborious it's going to be, and it's going to be for life. It is neither a sprint nor a marathon, it's a relay. We are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and our elders and their work, and we will continue this work, but we can do something right now. You can admit that this is not something that you are willing to let go and that you are actively going to disrupt or delay it, or you are going to omit, like we see with SPD, any semblance of equity, as we see with the executive order, where not only my being and my mind, but my entire career, my being is criminalized. Or you can consent that you don't understand it, but you're going to get out of the way. If you're committed to this, then you will act. It is part of your everyday. And there are people here who know what to do because our life is on the line. The people who consent and don't disrupt, and the people who are against this work, who admit the solutions, they obstruct progress. That third group, they have to step aside. The first group, the commit group, those who know what it's like to be Black, to have a police car slow down and ask you where you're going, to grow up seeing police cars as often as ice cream trucks, to really know what it's like to live this every single day, then you don't have the understanding that you need to actually do this work. So in closing, I just want to say that this is a time of historic solidarity. The Black Brilliance Research Project is a community-led, center-driven process that centers participatory budgeting as a systems change, a new way of governance with no task force cherry-picked by a wealthy white mayor. If we truly care about Black people, if you truly care about Black people in a city with a race and social justice initiative, in a county with an equity and social justice policy, in a state with an office of equity, if you really care about equity, we need to do the things that will bring actual equity. Policing does not bring actual equity. As they say in disability justice, nothing about us without us. But let me offer this too. Nothing in our name if we ain't even in the game. Not only should we make the rules, this is a time to pass the ball, pass the mic, pass the resources, defund SPD, invest in Black communities, commit to anti-racism and Black brilliance, and center impact over intent, and show integrity in what you do and who you say you are. Or admit, as my grandma said, that you are showing us who you truly are. Someone who blocks Black progress with empty words in a bootleg Rolex task force, and that we should believe you. We will strategize, and we will move forward in our survival and our liberation. Thank you.
Wow. We could stop there with just so many jewels and gems in there. And I hope folks were listening about the importance of ensuring that Black folks are at the center of leading this work. Because since the beginning of things like the general education system, anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity have deprived Black and Native students of opportunities to excel and thrive as our whole selves. From whitewashed curriculums to the school to prison to deportation pipeline, Black students and families have been denied the education we deserve in the public school system. Educational equity for Black students and families must move beyond platitudes into action, the way that Director Hersey was talking about. Our Black students, Black parents, and Black master educators possess the brilliance, lived experience, and the skills to transform education in our region to reflect and empower Black genius. Amijah Smith, who is a dynamic advocate, organizer, mother, grandmother, who is doing incredible work in our region, will speak to the work that is already happening and the solutions we expect to see in the future.
Thank you. Again, my name is Amijah Smith. I go by Amijah. Yes, a mother and a grandmother who's been doing education advocacy and justice reform work since I was a teenager. I have that lived experience in the 80s and the 90s where I watched my community be impacted by the racist and really poor policies of like 3 strikes laws, anything to criminalize us, bring drugs into our community, and definitely not provide us with quality education. Talk really bad about my community, the historical Central District and South Seattle, to tell us that we were nothing, to, I guess, fake us out in the richness of the communities where we are, but we know who we are, just for another community to come in and take advantage of low housing and push us out. And you see where gentrification has got us now, and you see how it's pushing us even further out into Skyway. Y'all should know that Seattle, that used to be the place where majority Black people live in Washington State, is no longer the majority. So I just want to say that this work that I've been doing in my advocacy has happened since I was a teen. And now being a mother, having children and a grandchild, I see it even in a deeper extent that this is imperative. This is not a game. and that we all not only should just be outraged. It's not about being emotional. It's about being strategic. And it's about saying enough is enough. Because when you think about all the years back of the advocacy, the resistance within our community, we're saying the same thing. For our ancestors who pray for us today, for me to be here to keep talking and to keep fighting, we have to keep talking. We have to keep fighting. But we ain't here for lip service. At least I'm not. I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime, but my children and my grandchildren will know that they got to keep this going, because this is not a game. So I just wanted to share with you all today, because I feel this in my body. This is just not a press conference to have a little showtime. That's not what this is about. This is about our lives. This is about our children. This is about our future. We need to divest from a police budget that has not made any gains for us with regard to safety. That's just common sense. Basic common sense. Invest into the communities that have the expertise, the brilliance. Not only will take care of us and our Black community, but will take care of others. That's just who we are as people. Always have been. So why people are scared, and I said why people, W-H-Y, I don't understand, but I actually could care less, because it's my community and my families that I'm seeing dying, being sent off to prisons, and dying in prisons. That's unacceptable. And that is not normal. And why someone would keep pushing policies and doing the same old thing that doesn't work, that's insanity. Sitting up in here and with positional power, but behaving in a way that's very anti-Black. I would even say white nationalists. But it's all institutional racism. Some of us can't see through the thick fog of what we're really under, but that's what it is. And I appreciate the community of all walks who are standing and holding the line around this work. A lot of my advocacy is in the education system, because I do believe that there's opportunities there. And the fact is, our precious babies are there. And unfortunately, it is a system that may provide opportunity for some. A few of us get out, a few of us survive it. But too often our children starting in kindergarten, and by the time they're 8 and 9, their spirits have just been beaten. And the reality is that their bodies have been beaten. Adult teachers calling the police on our children. Adult security officers holding our babies down. Treating our babies like they're trash. They are the most precious to us. And if you're a mama bear like me, no, that's unacceptable. And so it's time to hold not only the schools accountable, but the city accountable. Every office that makes these decisions about what happens to our bodies and places violence against us, they need to be held accountable. But also the community, we need to be held accountable. Don't you sit back and be too afraid, or sit back and say this doesn't have anything to do with you. We are in a collective community where when I'm doing bad, you doing bad. When you doing bad, I'm doing bad. To me, that's just the nature of humanity. And when our children are not okay, none of us are okay. Black people in Seattle and King County deserve equity now. And for me as a child advocate, I believe it begins with our children. Again, far too long, the schools have been places where there's been unaccountable administrators and teachers just doing our children wrong, endangering their brilliance, endangering their bodies, over-policing them in classrooms. I believe the school functions almost like a court. The principals, the judge, the teachers are the prosecutors, the police, the security guards. It's just unacceptable. We need to be in places, and we have opportunities when you have participatory budgeting, when you allow community to come in and be part of the decision process and having self-determination and leading and solutions. because we know how to take care of our children and love on our babies and take care of everybody else's children because we've been doing that too. So nothing about this anti-Blackness is normal and is surely not acceptable. Those in power at every level have wasted funds on task forces and studies. Come on now, you need more of that to get the same information? The African American and Black community been telling you what the situation been for decades, for centuries. Are you serious? You want a task force? That in itself makes me lose respect, concern for your critical thinking. A study of what? Are we studying you and the poor choices and why y'all keep giving money to these white-led organizations that aren't making any changes for our community? It's just time to divest. It's not even time to even waste our time with these task forces and studies. We've had enough of those. They all say the same thing. Ain't nothing changed. It's time to do something different. Trainings that are failing and delivery for equity. Man, our youth and our parents and our families know what our children need. It is time for action. From the mayor to the school board, to our legislators, to our governor, it's just across the state. Enough is enough. So some of the work, if y'all are not familiar, is really looking for our city budget. If it's going to relocate resources, it needs to relocate those resources back into the Black community and into our education. We are demanding that the city of Seattle and Martin Luther King County cut the funding from its criminal legal budget. Put that funding into restorative justice counselors. The funding that was taken when we removed the police officers, the city still has money from that. They've saved some money. Won't you reuse that money and invest it in restorative justice counselors at every school? The police ain't going to be there. Set up a parent family council of some sort that can investigate and give some decisions around what's happening around discipline, around threats, around racist policies or racist actions happening to our children, and be informed by the community. But our children are suffering, and that's across the board. They're suffering from social emotional stresses due to COVID, as well as all this racial tension. We need restorative justice counselors and people who can host healing circles for our children and our community. The levy funding that we pay taxes for, they need to go into community hands as well so that we can make decisions on what's best for our community. I love the Black brilliance in the research. How dare someone stop that? Y'all take everything else of what we create, how we walk, how we dress, how we dance, how we talk. You do everything else from us, but then you don't want us to make real solution? Come on now. This is not a game.
Thank you so much, Amija, for bringing
my energy.
I know you bring your whole human self, and that's not something a lot of people do or are able to do. So I really appreciate how you bring your humanity and you bring your truth, because people need to hear that. I mean, this is not a game. Black people are hurting. Black children are hurting. And we really have to take it seriously. So divesting from school resource officers and investing in restorative justice counselors, ensuring we have community schools, ensuring parents like you, advocates like you, are getting to inform process and budget and how our children are educated is so important. So thank you so much, family.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So we know that we have to divest from racist systems. This is a conversation that's happening in the mainstream around defunding SPD, but SPD is not the only system, is not the only institution that's causing harm as a part of the criminal punishment system. This includes courts, prosecutors, jails. There is a whole continuum that is harming our communities rather than making them safer. And we know that when we divest, that those investments have to go to community-led, community-driven solutions, which heal communities and prevent harm from occurring. The mayor has promised, or she promised in June, $100 million for Black communities, and yet she has not provided any real clarity on where those dollars are to come from. but the most likely sources are from pre-existing social service budgets and tax revenues like the new Jumpstart big business tax that is meant to support communities. It has important COVID relief. It supports the Green New Deal, and it's a part of affordable housing. And as community organizers, we don't want to see BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities pitted against each other for scraps, because to be quite frank, we deserve a lot more. So as a result, Jumpstart organizers, labor organizers, defund SPD organizers, and King County Equity Now, we're partnering on the Solidarity budget, which pushes back against the nonprofit Hunger Games. We refuse to be pitted against each other, and together we demand what we deserve, which is that the Jumpstart funds be used for their already pre-existing stated purpose for COVID relief, Green New Deal, and affordable housing, and that the mayor defund SPD by 50%. SPD has a budget of $410 million. 50% is $200 million, which means that the $100 million promised for BIPOC communities and the $100 million that was promised to Black communities can both be fulfilled and can be put into a Black-led research process that informs a community-based participatory budgeting process. So here with us now, we have Sean Good, the Executive Director of Choose 180, who will highlight for us the ways in which community is already doing the work of dismantling the criminal punishment system and building alternatives to prosecution, courts, and jails, which actually heal our communities and prevent harms. These are the solutions that we must invest in. Thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you, Seb. I appreciate you. I'm going to start by reading a bit of a speech from John F. Kennedy in 1963 in his Civil Rights Address. It says, "The Negro baby born in America today, regardless of the section of the state in which he is born, has about 1/2 as much a chance of completing high school as a white baby born in the same place on the same day. 1/3 as much a chance of completing college, 1/3 as much a chance of becoming a professional man, twice as much a chance of becoming unemployed, about 1/7 as much a chance of earning $10,000 a year, a life expectancy which is 7 years shorter, and the prospects of earning only half as much." Candidly, that was almost 60 years ago, and we can have the exact same conversation today. We cannot continue down the path that we've gone on in the past. Now, in paying homage to our ancestors, it behooves us to consider the possibilities that they left for us and begin to pick up the reins that they had left to the ground and continue this march forward towards justice. Because as it was said earlier, this is not a marathon, it is a relay. And with the baton in our hand and the greatest civil rights moment of our generation, it is imperative that we continue to run this race without exhaustion, fixing our eyes on what's possible, casting off everything that would so easily get in the way, the unnecessary divisions, the divisive conversations, the political partying, the power plays with dollars, casting off everything that would so easily trip us up and catch us away and proceed towards victory. And we know that we can do it, and we know that we can do it together, because if Black lives matter, then we ought to let Black lives lead. This isn't work that's brand new to the community. This work began long before us, and even in our recent history around the No New Youth Jail movement. Consider the prophetic voices from those who protested outside the barely built youth jail, saying that we shouldn't build it. Those prophetic voices that people laughed at, that they mocked, that they ridiculed, said that it's ridiculous to assume that we could live in a world that doesn't incarcerate children because some of them are really dangerous and need some place to be. Yet our now county executive says by 2025 that building needs to be repurposed. I might say to those naysayers of the past that if we would have leaned into the prophetic voices of No New Youth Jail, that maybe we could have saved ourselves millions of dollars. But no, instead, we didn't listen. We leaned into the white supremacy, the white authority, and we said, you know, well, if this is the way that we go, then this is the way that we'll continue to move. We should have listened then, and now we should be listening again. Where there is a broad coalition of leaders through King County Equity Now that are saying in concert, in beautiful synergy that is yet to ever be seen in our city, that we need to divest from law enforcement and invest in community-based solutions. Now, this isn't complicated. You don't both invest in the disease while you're investing in the cure, not if you authentically want to be healthy and whole. Now understand, we're not talking about police as individuals in this divestment investment conversation, although we could reduce it to that conversation as well and talk about the improprieties imposed upon Black communities by those portraying themselves as public safety officers, but only causing harm to those that have already been harmed by social and economic injustice. But we don't even have to have that conversation, y'all. What we can have a conversation around is cost-benefit analysis. Let's talk about cost-benefit analysis just for a minute. Now, if you are white, living in a suburban space in the city of Seattle, let me ask you a question. How often have you engaged law enforcement throughout the history of your life? Now, how much of your tax dollars are going to pay for those law enforcement officers that you hardly ever, if ever, have engaged? Then let's consider who's really being policed. When 80 to 90% of the people who went to King County Superior Court qualified for a public defender, that means we are policing poverty and not crime. And police should not hold the responsibility of solving for poverty, solving for drug addiction, solving for mental health issues, solving for the marginalized folks that are getting continually pushed and then resorting to behaviors to be able to find sustenance in their life, to be able to maintain day to day. Police should not be accountable for that, but there are professional people in the community, if resourced well, that could solve for that by simply being innovative. Let me talk a minute about innovation, y'all. Our organization, Choose 180, is an alternative to the criminal legal system. Now, we support 12 to 24-year-olds. Essentially, what happens is if a young person does something, but they live in a neighborhood that's overly policed, so the behavior is criminalized, that criminal referral gets sent to the prosecutor. The prosecutor then sends the young person to our organization. They get community instead of a criminal conviction, receive grace instead of guilt, and 90% of them don't return to the criminal legal system within 12 months. So riddle me this. Did their behavior need to be criminalized in the first place in order for their behavior to change? Or could community have sent them to our organization where we listen to behavior instead of criminalizing it, respond to behavior, and give that behavior the support necessary to pivot, commit to a new direction, and honor that commitment? This is not a complex conversation. It's just a conversation about who holds the power. And for too long, people who are distant from the issues hold the power and lord over based upon their superior knowledge that they're supposed to hold, when in reality, they lack the intelligible integrity to be able to move forward and allow those who are actually suffering and experiencing the trauma to dictate the solutions that are necessary for us to live into a future that does not look like ours today. And if over 50 plus years later, almost 60 years later, we're having the same conversation, then candidly, family, there's something wrong. And if my son and my daughter are having this conversation, and my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren are having this conversation, then we failed in this moment to take an innovative approach and stand in solidarity. But I promise you this, if we stand together, if we commit to being aligned with one another, not in homogeny, but in harmony, singing a soulful song of liberty, then all of us together can claim victory. Absent of task force, absent of politically picked people to be elevated to positions of power, but present on the ground in community. We can do that, and we can do that together. The question is, what will you choose? What decision will you make? I've made my choice. I'm going to stand with those who I come from. Folks like my father, who was a Vietnam War vet, heroin addict with a schizophrenia. Folks like my mother, who was a survivor of abuse and suffered from dissociative identity disorder. Folks like my brother, who was incarcerated at the age of 13 and wasn't released until he was a 21-year-old man. I'm going to stand with them because those are my people. Those are our people. Where are you standing today? Let's stand together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sean. I feel like you decided to spit a poem for us. I appreciate you asking us, where do we stand, and reflecting, we can, like so many of the young folks that we partner with as a society, we can choose 180 and do something completely different, or we can keep on the same pathway. And I feel like when we ask young people to be accountable for their behavior, we also have to ask community. We have to ask society to be accountable for our behavior and the things that we perpetuate and create. So thank you so much for being with us here today. Appreciate you.
Bless you.
We keep us safe. Safe communities are connected communities, thriving communities, communities that have resources and power that they need to organize to meet those needs. Black trans communities have been on the front lines of abolitionist movements to create public safety that works for everyone from the beginning, representing communities which are those most negatively impacted by our failed and racist, transphobic public safety systems. Black trans loved ones are developing brilliant, innovative strategies for healing and preventing harm. Kia Vishay will share with us their work in developing Civilianized 911 and how this will help us build a public safety system that actually works for us, especially for those communities most impacted by the failures of the current system.
Hello. It is so good to share space with everyone that's been conversing and speaking so passionately about their lived experiences and their work. And I'm so grateful to be here. I am representing SCC, which is the Sacred Community Connections. We are a part of the Black Brilliance Research Project. So freaking happy to be a part of that. We are a Black trans and non-binary led community project. We are on the streets, we are in the encampments, we are on Pack Highway, we are on Aurora, we are out there. We provide mutual aid, basic and emergency necessities, community-centered healing and case management. We do a lot of work around trying to respond to things that are emergent, and you really just don't want to have to call folks who might kill you. We were created in response to the lack of services and the lack of care around folks who use and inject drugs, are in the street and sex economy, and folks who are living without homes. And our staff reflects those folks down to a T. We believe in putting trust in folks living these experiences to lead us into a new future. I mean, we're there, but we need to be led in a different way. A future of better service providing, community-centered care, and overall how we as a county, society, and the world respond to emergencies. We're meeting folks where they are. We are removing barriers to services, and we are using the feedback from the streets to continue to shape our projects. I'm so proud. This is how we build a public safety system that actually works for us, not one that works based in fear and manipulates and causes so much more harm than any good. And I don't think anybody understands how COVID has impacted these communities and what this new world that we're all living in has done for folks who are not housed and who inject and who are, in the street economies. It was already very scarce as an outreach worker. Knowing where things are is extremely important. Knowing who to talk to get what, knowing when to get a little bit huffy with these institutions that are continuing to perpetuate harm against communities and Black trans communities and folks who are house free and things like that. Holding them accountable, and it was already very difficult. Turnover was already very high. There's a lot of folks that will go into communities and into encampments and look around and go, it's a little dirty around here. We're going to just bring you all some garbage bags. We're going to make them purple. It's going to be great. And they failed to talk to anybody, and they failed to see that folks were really, really hungry, and that folks were, that folks had kids, and they were, having issues with needles, and that they needed places to put those injecting materials, and that there was just so much more need, and people's voices are not being heard. As someone who's experienced this, I can tell you, it completely erases everything that you've established about who you are to go through these experiences, and to deal with the service providers, because nobody's actually prioritizing listening to hearing you. And on top of that, to add in the identities of being Black and being trans and being queer and being Indigenous and just generally being a person of color, it provides so many more safety risks. And in the end, we are the folks that are best suited to guide these projects, to inform the policies, to lead the way, and reclaim our identities in a way, take back our voices, create new paths. As a non-binary person, we don't have a lot of elders. We have to uplift these voices, and we need to be giving these folks their flowers now. We need to be providing community awareness that is informed by those who are the closest to the experiences. I don't know why that is a new idea. it seems like an idea that needs to be implemented in all of our broken systems. And that's really how we come back together as a community. We have acknowledged that we see a problem. We have acknowledged that there are issues. We acknowledge that Black folks are dying at a high rate, that trans folks are dying at a high rate, that queer folks are dying at a high rate, that Indigenous folks are dying and going missing, and people of color are dying. And we have yet to acknowledge exactly how we are going to make the folks that have to deal with this secondary grief feel seen, and how we are going to provide space for folks who have to constantly watch folks that looks like them be put in situations where they could lose their life and their livelihood. So I am very happy to be a part of this initiative. Nikita, I see you, boo, looking great. And I look forward to continuing to work with folks, and look out for SCC, because we are hoping to do we're going to do some extremely big things in 2020. And we really, really, really look forward to providing the community care that folks are needing.
Thank you so much, family. So excited to have you here and to be hearing about the work that you're doing. To not take too much time from our final presenter, I want to acknowledge that there has been a major wealth disparity. There is a huge wealth disparity in Seattle, King County. White families in Seattle have the highest median income in Seattle at $105,000, and more than double that of Black households at $42,500. Studies show that if we stay on the same trajectory that we're on, the wealth of Black families will be zero by 2048. We know that due to the denial and the theft of Black wealth that began with enslavement and has been entrenched in law and code through redlining and discrimination, that Black wealth has been stolen through predatory developers, public officials who refuse to repair decades of racist housing policies and regressive tax codes, as well as the prison industrial complex. This is work that has to happen to undo the Jim Crow apartheid that exists in the King County region. And we have regional leaders like Y. King Garrett here who will share with us the vision of change, economic investment, land development, and what it means to support thriving Black communities.
Peace, Nikita. Thank you. It's a lot of powerful words from people's real lives, you know. Again, KY King Garrett, third generation community builder from the Central District, Africatown, CEO, Africatown Community Land Trust, where our mission is to really make room for Black people to have space. You know, we are focused on acquiring and developing land that will allow for the beauty, the brilliance, and the best of the Black experience to grow and thrive as a part of Seattle. We've called the Central District home for almost 140 years before this Washington was even a state, and that's what we're working towards. In order for Black lives to matter, Black communities have to matter, because Black lives exist within Black communities. And the question of the day really is, are there Black people in the future in Seattle? Will Seattle be a world-class city or a one-class city, right? A world-class city that's inclusive of the communities of the world that have helped make the city, or a one-class city that's exclusive to the white and the wealthy? This is what the current course is. Seattle has an opportunity to lead, to course correct, and lead the nation, right? We have 3 companies that are in a space race to build condos and communities on Mars and the moon out of space. So I know it's a lot easier to figure out how we can have our communities grow and thrive right here in our neighborhoods in this city. In order for that to really happen, though, we need, you know, the leadership, you know, the mayor, to really move away, to take bold steps away from the historic white nationalist, white supremacist policies that have been entrenched in City Hall for decades, perpetuating the Jim Crow apartheid that you spoke of. And I would like to just bring up some of the slides. If we could get the first set of slides up so that people can really see when we say apartheid, which, you know, is most known for South Africa, What we're talking about is apartness, right? You know, us being apart from the good things. So you see here the education statistics that they've been saying they're going to close this education, achievement, opportunity. It's like different names for the gap, but the gap persists. And the gap is our children not being able to realize their brilliance inside of systems that's killing off their spirits and underdeveloping them. The next slide, please. Income, or this is home ownership, right? You would think that maybe Seattle, people are moving out of Seattle and moving into the county and buying new houses, but no. Home ownership for Black people is going down from, look at that, 20% from 48 to 28. And this is countywide, not just the city of Seattle. Next slide. Again, here you can see when we say apartheid or Jim Crow apartheid, you see the apartness from 42,500 of Black families to 105,000. This is not even the 66%, the 2/3 or the 3/5, should I say, the 60% that the Constitution. This is double. Can we go to the next slide, please? The wealth gap, almost $500,000 more wealth from a Black family to a white family. So this is the apartness that we're talking about. And this is not even, you know, asking questions about, well, how much commercial space do we own? How many buildings do Black people own downtown? How many high rises? How much port space, which really drives the economy? How many tech companies of scales? Health science? How many institutions of magnitude do Black people have in the city after being here for 140 years? You know, and how do we get to that place? You know, we don't exist significantly collectively as owners, as high wage employees, but really just being held in a position of essential workers, field workers that serve those that are wealthy, that can no longer even live in the city, being reserved, you know, to tiny house type, you know, shanty towns that we see. And so again, when you say Jim Crow and apartheid, you look then, and then you look at, you know, these tiny home villages that are populated by Black people who are represented in the homeless population by 60% of the population, right? So this is what we're seeing. This is the reality. We know there's different rhetoric around social justice and inclusiveness and being liberal. We hear that a lot in Seattle, but the material reality is much different. And right now, the numbers, right? They say men lie, numbers lie. I mean, men lie, women lie, numbers don't, right? So the numbers show us a reality of Jim Crow apartheid. And so what we need to do is stay focused on building a new normal rooted in equity. The mayor recently spoke just on the Converge platform, had an interview where she spoke eloquently that this has been systematically, this exclusion has been entrenched in the existing institutions of government and private, et cetera. The House Bill 1918 last year passed through the House and documented these things. But yet, and still, we have anti-Black policies that, like the recent, you know, kind of bait and switch from 200 million to 100 million for Black community to BIPOC community, which is very ambiguous. We don't know what that means, and we don't want to be baited in. We don't want other communities baited into the anti-Blackness being perpetuated by the existing systems. If there has been systematic exclusion, the only way to balance that out is with systematic inclusion. This is why in April, we called for a $1 billion fund to acquire and develop our communities to be a part of the future of the city, to build Africatown. And we need the mayor to maintain her commitment, you know, to making sure funds are going into the Black community. She said $100 million into the Black community. That's a little ways from $1 billion. She said over 10 years. But we need, don't bait and switch the community and try to create conflict. The budget is a value statement. They say where you put your money is where your mouth is, where your heart is. Where you put your money is where your heart is, right? And so to move away from this, again, we have to measure the numbers. We're going to probably hear a lot of things about programs that are happening, that are being invested in, but we got to go to the numbers and say, are we increasing ownership? Are we increasing business development? Are we really significantly participating in the economy. And so Africatown's vision is for us to have a thriving Black community. If we could get the next set of slides. If Seattle is a world-class city, then why shouldn't we have a world-class Black community here, right? So we've been here for over 140 years, and we want to be here in the future of the city. So some of our work has included the Liberty Bank building. You see here on 24th in Union, 115 units, allowing people to come back to the community with affordable rent or stay in the community, allowing Black businesses like Earl's, That Brown Girl Cooks, to have business that had longtime businesses in the community to stay in the community. Next slide. Other projects, next project is Africatown Plaza, which will be across the street, 130 plus units and more commercial space, again, to allow people who have endured the redlining, the weed and seed, the predatory lending that has caused our community to be pushed out of the community to come back and stay in the community. Next slide. Projects like, and here we see our children having a future. Next. Working to repurpose the Fire Station 6 on 23rd and Union as the William Grove Center for Cultural Innovation and Enterprise, so that we can connect the legacy of innovation, of creativity, of entrepreneurial spirit, making a way out of no way because we were forced to the economy, the knowledge-based innovation economy that's grown around us, but again, has not included us, and now is pushing our communities out of Seattle. Next slide. Partnering with organizations like Homestead Community Land Trust to bring affordable home ownership opportunities to our community so that people can actually have economic mobility and begin building that generational wealth to close the gap. Bringing millions of dollars of contracting to our community so that our contractors can be building the community that we are a part of. But at the end of the day, the work that has been demonstrated, the work that we've been able to do with so many different partners and community entities and community members is really just a demonstration that another path is possible. Another world is possible. It's not just gentrification happens. No, gentrification and displacement is a product of people's choices. So different choices can produce a different outcomes. And so what we need is greater investment. This is why we put out the call for $1 billion fund to scale up, because those are just really a drop in the bucket, right? If 100,000 people are coming to Seattle a year, how many of those are Black people? Where do they work? What do they own? Where do they live, right? These are the numbers that we need to be measuring going forward to understand what is happening. And the budget, the redirecting funds from ineffective police, that exhibit this Proud Boy behavior time and time again for decades, redirecting that money to community for more effective public safety strategies is mandatory. It's the one thing that the mayor can do in her position to show that she is committed to building a more equitable Seattle, a Seattle that's rooted in equity and move away from the Jim Crow apartheid reality that we're currently in.
Thank you so much, White King. That's an excellent transition for us, and appreciate all the work that you've been doing for 30 years, part of a generational history of Black organizing in our community that is really building thriving Black communities. So thank you so much.
Definitely. If folks want to get involved, help build Africatown, they go to africatownlandtrust.org to get more information about these type of projects.
Incredible. Thank you so much, family. All right. I just want to close this out real quick and say, if you remember anything from the things that you've heard tonight, the first is that the status quo, going back to the status quo, kills Black people and deprives Black people and Black and Brown and Native communities of wealth, education, homes, and freedom. And that it is incumbent upon us to listen to the voices of Black leaders, Black organizers, Black community members as to what the solutions are. The executive order that came out from the mayor today does not offer real solutions. Rather, it is something that is cynical, and it's a bad faith attempt to separate the divestment conversation from the investment conversation. If investments that are not coupled with divestment from police that target Black communities, it's not true public safety. So We have brought you solutions. We have shown you people doing the work, and we are so excited to keep doing that work. We've been doing it. We are doing it. We will do it. And we will build a public safety system that works for everyone.
All right. Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Nikita Oliver. And thank you for everybody who presented there. Well, we heard from a wide range of people in community, everything from development and land trust over to, Sean Good, who's working with youth over there. We heard from the people with defund. We've heard from everybody. We really heard from them too. Elijah Smith on education. I think the one thing we'll probably take away there is a lot of passion.
Definitely a lot of passion, and definitely a lot of people that have had the experience of, well, being Black, not only in America, but in Seattle. And I think that sometimes people assume that Seattle is super liberal, so we ain't got no problems up here, but that's really not the reality.
Yeah, that's for real. They just need to come up here for a couple weeks.
Right. And,
aggressiveness one time.
And unfortunately, so people who watch on the Converge network, they're used to very long format, right? But we also have to respect our partners that are out, and we're on broadcast radio as well. And we're definitely over time right now. We're up against the clock, and I think that's why some of the questions that we want to ask right there, there's no time for it. But this just means we're going to have to do this again. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we're going to have Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan and her executive team. This is the Storytown Hall.
Our friends at Elysian have us here today for what they call an open mic. Social injustice and the issues we have in this country, it's there again, but I guess it's because it never went away.
Exactly. I think although the pandemic, obviously nobody wants to experience what we're going through right now with all the different changes and whatnot, and with the protocols and whatever. But I think the one positive thing from this pandemic is that no one really has an excuse anymore, right? You have the excuse of going to work. You can thumb through Twitter, Instagram, check your phone, like, oh man, that's crazy. And then you're driving to work, you're dropping the kids off, you're doing all these different things. This pandemic put us all at a standstill. Now we all have to pay attention. We all have to listen to a lot of the things that, honestly, just like you just said, people have been talking about forever. But now is the time for us to kind of make a change, and everybody has to kind of sit and live with it and understand that, hey, it's crazy out here a little bit for some people. And again, having these dialogues, I think is huge.
We're right here at East Precinct. It doesn't get any closer than this right now.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. As a small independent media company, we rely on the financial support of individuals and business members to stay on the front lines of the news that's important to you.
Look, you got the screen all to yourself. I know you're a big star and everything, Besa. You ain't getting flamed.
Like, oh, hey, y'all.
You're not over there getting flamed on Twitter, are you? I see you over there scrolling.
No, I'm not. I'm actually getting a bunch of followers. So shout out to everyone that's following me at me.
All right, that's what's up. So, man, we're already deep into the second hour, so we're gonna move quickly over here into Mayor Durkan and her team. I'll pass it over to you guys to introduce it. But we got Emily Alvarado, who we've had before on Converge. She's over at Housing. We've definitely talked to her before. Dwayne Chappelle, covering education, and Andreas. Talked to Andreas a lot of times before as well. He's community and neighborhoods, and of course, the chief executive of our city, Mayor Durkan. Marcus Besa, the floor is yours.
All right.
I mean, I don't know what Marcus wants to say, but I would like to say shout out to everyone that's hung around this long. Thank you for pulling up in the first place. Right now, we have the mayor coming in, and as we all know, she's been talking about this $100 million budget. Today, she actually came out with a new plan for SBP, and let's be frank, we all have questions about what's going on with our kids and their COVID learning. Marcus, what you got to say?
Yeah, I just want to say let's go ahead and get into it. This is an event we've been waiting for. So here we go.
Hey, Sean, bring him in. Hey.
Hey. Good evening, Mayor Durkan.
Hello, you guys look like you're muted right now. Okay, Mayor Durkan, you are unmuted. I can see. How are you?
I'm good. We're the late show, I guess. Thanks for having us on.
No, you're the last show, but guess what? I'm pretty sure you are really what everyone is wanting some answers from right about now.
I know, but I mean, what we've seen so far is pretty amazing. So this is a great format. Thanks for letting me and the team on here. You've seen some of the great team we have at the city talking about some of the more important issues. But why don't we get at it? How do you guys want to go?
Yeah, well, me and Besa are highly caffeinated, so we can definitely get it on
Let me
here.
tell you, I have coffee all in here.
There, now we're talking. Can I have some of that virtual coffee?
If only. So, Mayor Durkan, we did want to start as we know that we only have a few moments today, just because the show has run long. We know that earlier today you did announce an executive order that was essentially going to transition some SPD functions to civilian community response. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why you decided to do that, and why you decided to do that right now as opposed to earlier than today?
So that's a great question. First, thanks for having me on, and thanks for having my teammates on here too. I want to make sure I leave time for some of the amazing things they're doing. So I look at this as a holistic solution. And the first executive order I signed when I was sworn in was an order trying to refocus our government on race and social justice, because all of the disparities that Joaquin just talked about and that we know are real were the ones we saw on the ground in education and home ownership. When I grew up in Seattle, the Central District was about 75% Black, and today it's less than 14%. And we've seen by every economic and health indicator how far the Black community and other communities of color have been falling behind. So we've been looking at this holistically, but look, everyone knows that when the murder of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis ignited this new civil rights reckoning, we had to make sure that we doubled down as a government and acknowledged our part in systemic racism, not just in policing, but across all governmental systems and public and non-governmental systems. And how do we as a whole government really try to center the Black lives that matter and say, how do we change that? And so there's a range of things we want to talk about policing in your question, but there's also the investment we know we need to make to really change and provide true community safety, because I believe true community safety, it comes from those upstream investments to make sure that you have access to affordable housing, to wealth building, to home ownership, to great education. And that's why I have the three people we have on today who can talk about some of those programs we have and how we're going to make them increase the availability. On policing, to the order we did today has to be seen in line with the $100 million fund that we've created that will be driven by a process that is centered on the community and community voice. The members of this steering committee or task force, they will be self-organized, they will engage with the public, they will hear all voices, because I think as Nikita pointed out, the community is not monolithic. We want a range of voices there. We hope that King County Equity would participate. I'm sure the task force will still have them participate. And those brilliant Black researchers, I think that work will complement everything that we're doing. So on policing, we announced today to lay out the framework to really do the work that we promised this summer that we would do. And that is to take a deep dive across all departments, but informed by community, to really look at what are the jobs police do today that really they shouldn't be doing, that we need some other community-based or health harm reduction response. We've got some of those. Sean, who you saw, Choose 180 is a fantastic program that the city's been fortunate enough to have. So we need to scale those programs, but we need to do it in a methodical way so that we really, when someone calls 911, they get a response, and that's our goal.
So Mayor, when you say, these proposals and so forth are informed by community, who exactly is community? Who are those people?
So, and if you don't mind me asking, Mayor, I'm sorry, who are these community members and what are the qualifications that are allowing you to pick these community members?
So I'll take those both questions. Take the second one first. So we'll be probably announcing task force members next week. Part of that is because the people that are involved are self-organizing. And I think they're going to be determining both who their leadership is, to see whether the topics that we've suggested they look at, which are as broad as we could be based on the communication, the meetings we've had over the last 3 years and over the last 4 months. And it really, I think that you will see it as it is people who have been rooted in community work for many, many years, and who ties across all sorts of community. And I believe it's really critical that, while it is public money and I'm the mayor and we at the end have to follow all of the rules of public giving, we have become so top down as a city. And on this topic, we have to make real on empowering community to decide where are those focused investments upstream that they believe they want to make. And I believe this $100 million is just the start. I believe it has to be over at least 10 years to get the kind of outcomes and institutional changes that is necessary.
Okay. Well, Mayor, I know that you're obviously, you mentioned Sean Good earlier. Obviously, you're privy to the op-ed that he wrote in the South Seattle Emerald, saying that you had asked him to be on the task force. He declined. Some of his reasoning was that he said that he didn't want to sort of feel that he was just sort of there, and I'm paraphrasing, kind of there for window dressing. And so how can folks make sure that these folks who are going to be on this task force do have some say so, and they aren't just props or window dressing, if you will?
Great question. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Sean. I consider him a friend. He's done amazing work. And I think what you'll see is the public and the community will have to judge for themselves. The work of this group will be completely transparent. I think they will decide the course and chart the engagement and really focus down on where those upstream investments need to be made. And they could be scaling up some of the programs you're going to hear about today that we have already in the city to increase, for example, home ownership. Or they could be increasing our preschool programs or aid for mothers who are pregnant. I mean, there's a range of focus that there could be done. I'm not going to prejudge that. I really believe community has to decide. And so I will champion it. We will give it all the support we can. They will have the support from all the city departments. And I think we're arranging to also have technical expertise. I think that research that we're going to get from some of the people that were here earlier will help inform the decision. So I think these things are very complementary. And I think the goals are surprisingly the same. I look at those pictures of Africa Town and very, very, just proud of what they've been able to accomplish, and really happy, that the city was able to help them do that through our Office of Housing and also the Equitable Development Initiative that we have to make sure Brown Girl Cooks and Earls had some ability to get in there. So there's a range of things that are happening. Fire Station 6, my office just negotiated that with Africa Town, sent it down so it can be returned to community. We've got to move on every level in order to do the work we need to do.
You just mentioned housing, and personally, I'm from the CD. My family was one of the families displaced from the CD, and I'm literally my only blood relative that is back in Seattle now as of February. So out of curiosity, I would love to know if you guys have anything in your plans to make it a lot easier for Black families to, one, move back to the Central District, which is our home, where I'm comfortable, where I would frankly rather be, hence why I now live downtown, and also have some equity while they are back in their home area of the CD, which is, well, where we originally were. Well, some of us.
Amazing question. And if I can turn it to Emily, because she's helped develop some really great programs to just do that. Home ownership, particularly, and we have anti-displacement executive order that I signed that will give first choice to those people who have been displaced. Building equity. And today I'm on the Sound Transit Board, and the Sound Transit voted the executive committee to have additional parcels in Rainier Valley turned over for that same kind of program. So if I turn it over to Emily Alvarado, head of housing, to give you more information on that, that'd be great.
Hey, Emily.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Thanks for having me tonight. It's nice to be here. You know, that story is spot on. We see from the data, we hear from the stories that Black families want to return to the Central District. And, you know, the mayor mentioned some programs that I've initiated or I'm working on, but really our best programs are coming from community. They are the ideas coming from community. You saw why King talk about Africatown. As the mayor said, we were happy to make that announcement and investment. We have a really good investment also on the corner of 23rd and Jackson. It's called Judkins Heights. It's owned by Community House. And what's amazing there is that we were able to implement a community-initiated vision called community preference. And this is a policy that in our affordable housing makes it so that units have a priority access for people who have been long-standing residents of the neighborhood or who have been displaced. So at that corner in 23rd and Jackson, there were 74 units. They applied community preference for the first time. 800 households applied for the 74 units. They were all 800 households who had been displaced from the community. That shows the policy works, community's policy makes sense, and we just need to make sure it's scaled up. You also ask a great question on homeownership. And, you know, the city has not put enough attention into homeownership because in most cases, city and government policy on homeownership has been about giving wealth to white people. It has been discriminatory. We're working to change that. Over the last 20 years, we've invested in 200 permanently affordable homes. That's pitiful. Over the next 7 years, we're going to work to double that. As the mayor said, we have an opportunity to build 150 permanently affordable homes in the Rainier Valley. Again, a project brought to us by community advocacy. Puget Sound Sage and other activists made sure that Sound Transit vacant land could be rebuilt to provide permanently affordable homes. What I like about the permanent affordability model, why King's Community Land Trust model, is that we both can have wealth building for individual households and we can have community stability. Because if we just get windfalls of profits through homeownership to households without getting that community stability, we see displacement. So we look forward to working with community there too, to make sure that households that have been displaced from the Rainier Valley or at risk of displacement have a chance to become homeowners in those spots. Again, we have some strategies. We need to scale them so that they're even more impactful.
Right. Well, you say people who have been displaced from the Rainier Valley and places like South Seattle and so forth. Right. I was just talking to somebody, Mayor Durkan, who I consulted with. I had spoken with them as a community member in the 2017 race, and they talked about, you know, that this was going to be they felt this was going to be the last time they could ever vote for the mayor of Seattle because of the fact that they were going to be economically pushed out. And I followed up with that person actually not but a week ago, and you know they're now living in Skyway in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 other people. And so I guess what I want to ask is, okay, if we're building this housing for folks who are here now and so forth, what is going to get our Black community to come back to Seattle? What are going to get the numbers that we've lost to come back? Or can we? What is being done for these people who are facing economic evictions and have had to move, all the way out to Puyallup, and yet, are still rooted here culturally and communally in Seattle?
Let alone to keep the ones that are here,
right.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that, because I mean, you just look at the data, the statistics, that the median white family is earning over $100,000, while the median Black family is only $42,500. Tells you everything you need to know about the economics and why Seattle's have been more and more gentrification. Look, we need to do more than we're doing, and we need to do it more quickly. And Emily and I have that conversation all the time, is how do we build houses more quickly? How do we build more affordable housing? Since I've been mayor, we've announced almost $1.5 billion in new affordable housing, and it doesn't come close to touching what we need. So at the same time we're coming up with these models of affordable housing, I think we have to look upstream at those other issues. How do we make sure that, you know, we have Black businesses that are successful and not just Black owned, but Black people? How do we look forward to things like the West Seattle Bridge and make sure that we as a city have changed our contracting laws and rules and give people support, so when those dollars start to flow, hundreds of millions of dollars, we can make sure they start flowing into the Black families and families of color? We have to hit the education system. I love that Dwayne's here, because I think education is so critical, but we need to also make sure that that we have these strategies and they're cohesive together and holistic, because gentrification is happening so quickly. We saw it in the Central District. We saw it in Columbia City. We're now seeing it in Rainier Valley. And as you said, everyone's being pushed to Renton, to Skyway, to Kent. And so we not only have to stop the flow, we have to find ways to come back, bring people back. One more idea. I don't think government can do it alone. But when I see those pictures of Liberty Bank and the housing there, I love it on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm so sad that we don't have Liberty Bank itself. And one thing we need to do is find ways to actually get capital into the hands of Black families so that they can build their businesses, they can own their homes in the same way that white people did under GI bills and GI loans and the other privileges that we've had. And I think that that also has to be a part of what we do, not just in Seattle, but across the country.
I'm sorry, Mark, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know we do want to turn to education and
I was literally going to say, before we literally turn over to education, I have one quick question about low income housing. And that is, as someone that's lived in low income housing, sometimes it's like, it's low income, but it's still not low enough to where you can actually save some money. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, it's low enough to where you can make your bills, but you're literally still living check to check, which makes it to where you're constantly having to stay in low income housing. You're constantly having to eat food that is, well, not healthy. And let's be frank, that's what no one needs right about now during COVID. This is the time where everyone needs to be eating the healthiest of foods rather than fast foods, because we all need to be healthy. So is there anything that you guys have in the pipeline to make it to where, yes, someone is living in affordable housing, but they're also able to still somehow put money aside to where within a year or two, maybe they don't have to live in affordable housing anymore?
I'm going to let Emily tell you about one program, and then I'll come back if there's time and tell you about some conversations I've had with both of our senators on how we change federal policy to make that easier for people too.
Yeah, obviously saving's a big deal, and we want to create opportunity for people to save. I think part of what we can do is through permanently affordable homeownership. Quite frankly, we're looking at building homes for people at affordability levels that otherwise would have been renting, so that you can start building equity into your home. So if we are expanding a strategy where people can actually own, even when they're low income, then you can use some of that savings and build equity. So it's a model that's working as low income housing that both creates personal wealth and community stability, and we want to scale it up. We also know that there are other strategies out there that have been done with savings programs from the Housing Authority, and we need to look at how we can scale that up. We want to make sure that also you talk about the connection between housing and healthcare and education. And I know Dwayne and I have some good conversations and in conversation with community about how we co-locate affordable housing with services, food banks, healthy food, health clinics, so that people get supported holistically in community.
All right.
I could also just add one thing about healthy food, if I can, because I think one of the things that we heard from the earlier community is like, what are we going to move into to do next? And so the Department of Neighborhoods, I'm Andres Mantilla from the Department of Neighborhoods. Thanks for having me on, but we're going to be setting up in partnership with the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, a healthy food fund in 2020 and 2021. That's focused specifically on, it's funded through the sweet and beverage tax. It's focused specifically in reinvesting into where that tax was disproportionately collected. So we look at food deserts, we look at a map around food justice, we know all the indicators, we know all the data. And so putting that into action in order to fund organizations to actually fund those programs to meet those needs. So I thought I'd just add that.
Hey, I want to make sure Dwayne gets the time to talk, but I just want to come back and give you a teaser for later, some other conversation we'll have. I think one of the answers to what you've asked about people who are low income but still can't make it. We've seen the other end too, where they're low income, but if they earn a little living, they're kicked out of the thing because suddenly they're earning too much and they're still low income. I believe we need a universal basic income for certain levels, that we make sure people just have that set living and they still can qualify for low income housing. So right now, the federal policies are in the way of that. I've talked to the senators about how can we get more assistance to people and not have it disqualify them from the low income housing. So I think there's something happening there. At least I hope I do. But I want to give Dwayne a chance to talk about education because we're doing some really cool things there. And I think it's a big key to making Seattle a more equitable city.
Right.
And Dwayne, before you also get into education, whatever Marcus asks you, I definitely want for you to address the fact that a lot of students are saying, and parents, that their kids have really, old laptops. So they're having a hard time even getting logged in. So whatever Marcus asks you, I want for that to be added onto it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, basically. Dwayne, I wanted to ask you, and obviously, Mayor Durkan, please chime in. We have a massive and widening gap between Black and white students in Seattle that has existed ever since I was a student. I'm 38 years. I'm 38 years young, and I would say that my parents took me out of public school because of that gap back then, and that gap has done nothing but continue to widen. And so, how do we specifically address that now, more than just platitudes? And it's really, really important that we do so. Like, what are the concrete, actionable steps that we do to narrow this gap?
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. So when people in education talk about opportunity gaps, ultimately they're talking about the difference in access of outcomes for some groups and compared to another group. So for an example, we often compare graduation rates for Black students and white students, right? And at DEAL, we're being very intentional about not comparing our students of color to a standard of whiteness. So instead, what we do, we look at our young people and say, what is the goal for all children, right? We want every student to graduate from high school. And so the goal for us is 100%. And then we look at that goal and say, okay, let's peel that wallpaper back and let's look and see what barriers are in the way. And from there, we target our investments to reduce those barriers and promote student success. So with that foundation, I want to quickly give like a few other key perspectives for us to look at. The first one is that, and it's kind of what you just mentioned, Besa, we know that this year under COVID, man, our kids, or should I say the traditional education system has been totally disrupted. And we know that the changing to a remote learning environment is actually going to make those existing opportunity gaps worse. So especially for students of color. So, but fortunately for us being City of Seattle, our taxpayers passed the Families Education Preschool and Promise levy, which is about, which ultimately means that the City of Seattle, my department specifically, get a chance, and we're responsible for investing $600 million in our Seattle children's and youth and families education from 2019 all the way through 2026. And those funds specifically are intended to close race-based opportunity gaps. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then the second thing I wanted to share was for those families. We have a couple of resources that are out there right now for families who are willing and feeling comfortable to bring their children to some programs, And the first is for our young children, school-age children, 8 grades, kindergarten through 5th grade. There's childcare being offered at 19 community centers here in Seattle. And then the second one is that we have some teen hubs being offered for our middle and high school students. And that's at 7 community centers here in Seattle. And both programs are ran by our good partners over at the Seattle Parks and Rec. And they are taking the necessary steps and precautions to make sure students are able to log in to those Seattle School remote classrooms. They're also providing lunch and snacks And for me as a dad, and I have 3 children myself right now that are in the school system, I know how it is for those programs, for families can be. So I just wanted to share that because we cannot overlook those resources. And I know I'm long-winded, but the last thing I really want to talk about is just like how important it is for us to be meaningful and intentional about closing this opportunity gap for Black and Brown students. And it's something that I'm super proud that our department invests in. And I heard earlier Director Hershey mention it when I was listening. But a few main things that we're focusing on. We're looking at culturally responsive education. And I know that sounds like a technical term, but it's extremely simple. Basically, our kids need educators who look like them, who look like me, and who reflect their lived experience. They need curriculum where they can see themselves, they can identify themselves and have a positive narrative. And they also need, which we all know, is authentic relationships and positive interactions from mentors and educators on a daily basis. So those 3 things that I just mentioned is what I'm talking about: educators of color. I'm talking about some type of culturally responsive curriculum. I know Director Hershey mentioned that earlier. And I'm also talking about relationships. If we can do those system-wide, right then and there, our opportunity gaps will close. And then we'll see the experience and the intelligence and the brilliance in our Black and Brown scholars here in Seattle start to flourish. But the reality is, it's not just the responsibility of one individual. It's the responsibility of all of us to make sure that these changes happen. So I'll stop because Marcus knows I'll keep going.
I mean, let's not act like people don't want to hear you. I do have one question. What is the barrier between City Hall and community?
What is the barrier between City Hall and community? So the way I look at it is that I look at partnership as the key to anything, right? So we're looking at how do you collaborate with folks? How do you partner with folks? And I can tell you my experience and what I've done within DEAL has been truly collaborative. So for the example, I'm gonna use the Families in Education and Preschool and Promise levy. When developing that levy, we had a great partnership with community. We engaged so many individuals, and we actually brought individuals to the table. So I think when you bring people to the table and make sure that voices are heard, and which is really how the FEP levy package that Mayor Durkan put forward was really developed within partnership within City Hall, partnership within departments, and partnership within communities. So ultimately, it's about that. It's about triangulating partnership. That's what I believe.
And I want to say, I think Dwayne's being a little bit modest there because, look, our Families in Ed levy compared to what the Seattle Public Schools budget is the small part. Mm-hmm. But he's working with community really is able to use that to leverage on the issues we're talking about today. How do we make sure that every dollar we're spending on our levy is actually closing the opportunity gap, providing kids the ability to graduate, getting them into college for free, but also putting programs in place so that you get more Black principals and assistant principals like we have at Rainier Beach, more teachers, supporting programs like that. And then working across our city departments so that we know that if you look right now at how many kids didn't even sign online during school last spring, kids of color, particularly young Black men, didn't even attend because there's so many barriers. So we're trying to see what can the city do to make sure, not that they just have a laptop, which they need, and access to the internet, because the school district is working better on that. But how do we make sure they've got someone in their lives and mentorships and a place they can go for support? And Dwayne has been he and his team working with community and working with his connections through the schools and the trust that he's built has helped us do that.
Well, Mayor Durkin, I know that it's probably no secret that a lot of people feel that city council and community and City Hall is not necessarily on the same page. But even tonight, we've had at King County Equity Now, they put forward their plan. One of the lines that one of the speakers said was, we want a true participatory budget that is not just put forward by wealthy white folks and so forth. You obviously have the $100 million plan that you have proposed and put forward over the course of 10 years. How can we get everybody on the same page, and how how can we get to a point where it doesn't appear that people don't feel that City Hall is obstructing some of the things that community is actually trying to do?
Totally fair question. And I think I took away from earlier how much common ground there is. I know that's because I'm an optimist. And I think once community starts getting engaged themselves and the task force is meeting with people, that we will see that there's so much common ground and that we actually are able to deliver. And I just, the budget we put forward this year really is a budget that has to reflect our policies and our values. And I had to do it as mayor in the toughest budget season that our city's ever had, literally. We had almost $300 million shortfall. But I had promised community that we would set aside the $100 million for community to guide. And I mean it. And I think people, what will start to build the trust is when people see that it's going to happen. And I think it has to happen now. I don't think we should wait. And I don't think we should, we need to do this not just in 1 year, but over a period of 10 years. And it's like we did in the Families and Ed Levy. People said, how are you really going to get people free college? And we found a way to make sure we did it, and not just year after year, so people had to come back to City Hall, but we put it in the levy so people could count on it and we could see and get the outcomes we wanted. So I think we have to have that same approach. I listen to the criticisms, I take them to heart, meeting with folks from all the community, and I really hope that people decide to participate in this, show that we can work together, and see that you can have what King County Equity is doing be the perfect complement and part of an integral part, if not the foundation, of what we'll do as community decides how this $100 million needs to be invested.
Well, Mayor, one of those criticisms has been that your plan is, for lack of a better term, robbing the jumpstart tax there. What is your—
Yeah, Marcus, I'm glad you asked me about that, because there's a lot of confusion and that's actually not true at all. When we did the budget this year, the mayor, we have about over a $6 billion budget if you look across all the departments. Our general fund is the fund that is our most flexible, that can be used for almost any governmental purpose. And that's what we have to take this $100 million out of. That general fund is the one that lost a lot of the money. And so I took every tool I could. I have to propose a budget that uses all the dollars, that balances. So I used a range of tools. We drew down our emergency funds. That's over $50 million. We froze hiring. We did a lot of things to build a budget that we could fund what we needed to. And my priorities were, number one, we need to continue our COVID relief. We've seen during this economic time, again, both the health consequences and the economic consequences have hit our communities of color. The health consequences, the Latinx community more, but the African-American community close. So we know we have to continue that relief or people will fall even further behind. Second priority for me was this $100 million was going to be fenced off until community could have their say about what happened to it and really look at where it needed to be invested. There's a lot of demands for it, and I think you will see over the coming months as City Council is wrestling with the budget, there'll be a great temptation to take some of that money and use it for other purposes and not let community guide it. So that will be the one thing that will be a big priority for me, is to make sure that we really hold to this truth. And we did not cut the other social programs we had in place. And the Jumpstart money that was in the budget this year was always going to be used for the purposes that we're using it for. The Green New Deal plan is for the next calendar year, for 2022. And that's why I think we have to find more dedicated revenues, like an income tax that can tax the wealthy to pay for these investments on a long-term basis.
And so, Mayor Durkan, what does success look like with this project? What can the community, what can your constituency hold your feet to the fire, like Lindsey Graham? What can we replay back 2 years from now and say, this is exactly what success was supposed to look like? This is exactly what you said you were supposed to do.
So I think the short-term success, and I think that's in the next year, is short-term, is that we see that community is coming together and they are actually the ones engaging and focusing on where those investments should go, and then developing the program and the ordinance that you actually have to pass to get that money into people's hands. But success really for me can't be judged in a year. Success for me is that, 10 years from now and 20 years from now, we see the generational shifts. We have to be thinking in terms of generations, because it has been generations that have been denied. And if we want to have a program that is really going to turn the dial, we have to quit thinking budget season to budget season. We have to be thinking in terms of generations, so that the kids who are in preschool today, that they can live in a community that's thriving, has access to affordable housing and healthcare and economic opportunity, and that their siblings maybe have graduated with their 2 years free college of Seattle Promise, and they not only have the tech job, maybe they started the next great tech company. I want to point out one program we haven't talked about today, Technology Access Foundation, which is started here in Seattle, then moved to Federal Way, is now back in Seattle. And it is a program that teaches STEAM to Black and brown kids in design form. It's one of the most successful in the country. It's back here at Washington Middle School. And I think that will be one of the jewels in the crown that shows how we can turn the dial.
Ma'am, I know that we have to let you go soon, and I would really hope that I can have you back on with like my night show on KUBE or just something else in the future. But I would personally love to know, for the Black community, if there is anything in your pipeline where there is a allotment of money that is specifically for the Black community rather than BIPOC.
It's a great question. I think that my personal view is that in this moment of time, when we are centered on Black voices and showing that Black lives matter, and when we are finally, as a city and a state in much of the country, acknowledging the harms of racism, the Jim Crow laws, and realizing that systemic racism is real, that the only way that you can actually repair that is to acknowledge it and then make reparations. And that I believe in that to my bones. And so I'd love to come back on and talk about that and how we do that. As you know, we had Initiative 200, which prohibits us from dedicating for certain circumstances based on race. But we think, given the disparities that we can demonstrate, and given what this task force and community will engage in, that we can and should center it on Black lives. And again, you've heard it from Y. King, and you've seen it yourself growing up in the Central District. Not just that people get gentrified, but the whole Black history has almost been erased. You can't drive by your childhood home and know the people who are living there, or the restaurants you went to, and that's what we have to try to dial that back. And so I think it's got to be a cohesive thing over a period of years, and it's got to hit everything: education, economic opportunity, home ownership. We also will probably have a whole program on policing as well, because obviously we have to make significant changes there.
Marcus.
All right. Well, it looks, unfortunately, like we are out of time.
Are we at that hour?
We're at 9 o'clock. I definitely have way more questions for you, but I know that you have to go soon.
Yeah, I would be happy to come on if you wanted some other time and soon, and find a thing to sit down. I would want to give Andres or Dwayne or Emily, if they've got anything that they haven't had a chance to say that they think would be important for community. I'd love for them to have a chance.
Yeah, I think community would love to know if they have anything else to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Andres Montillo at the Department of Neighborhoods. I'm just reflecting on a question that you asked of what's separating community from City Hall. And I think there is, for too long, we've been operating from the engagement space, which I operate in silos, and the engagement and feedback is not tied to policy. So in this moment, when we're talking about all the different pandemics that Nikita and others and the mayor have referenced, how do we shift fundamentally the way that government is engaging with community to break down those silos? We know at the Department of Neighborhoods that every issue is connected to one another. It's not like a transportation issue that's not connected to affordable housing. So we have to look at the comprehensive nature of it. And we've engaged in participatory budgeting through the Your Voice, Your Choice program. We would love to learn more. And I was really taken by Sean and their presentation. And so the Department of Neighborhood believes that to invest in community to forge their own solutions. And so we'd love to be here as a partner. So thank you for having us on today.
All right, and Mayor Durkan, I would, certainly love to have a follow-up conversation with you at some point on the Emerald platform.
We'd love to do it. Happy to do it.
All right. I know we have several questions that we did not get to tonight, unfortunately, but we certainly will get to at some point. So.
Yes, I want to definitely thank you all for taking the time to come. I know it's a little bit late, but let's be honest, this is a hot topic, and this is just really a conversation that our city has needed to have.
And just a beginning of a conversation. We need to have it in many places, many platforms. The thing I regret is we can't be doing this, together so that people can see each other and have that kind of engagement. But I want to thank you for doing this, and I want to thank Converge Media too. They have been an indispensable media company during this period of time, and I want to thank you guys for giving us the ability to talk to community.
Yeah. I would love to know when we can have you back. If you have like an answer, like would we be able to have you pull up like in a couple of weeks, or because I know you have like an announcement coming on Monday or so.
Yeah, I will. Can I get back to you? I don't have my calendar in front of me, but we'll get back to you and set a date.
Okay.
Does that work? The truth be told, I get no calendar authority. So now that I promised it, my people watching this are going, God, there she goes again, messing up her calendar. But yes, I will come back.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys for pulling up. We thank you all for tuning in. I thank you, Marcus, for being my co-host. Where's Omari? Is he coming back in a second?
Thank you very much, Miss.
Okay, boom. Omari, unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, man, first of all, yeah, well, man, I got a lot of thoughts. And we'll maybe discuss them in the morning on the morning show here. But
hey man, have me pull up.
we might have to do the video link in the morning, man, because I got a lot of questions. But at the same time, I will say this is that going into this, we knew that it's imperfect. You know what I'm saying? But I think that like one good thing, a few good things that come out of this is that when we look back here real quick, Gurmai, Council Member Zahalai, Director Hersey, being able to give some real insights and perspectives, from their positions, our Black elected officials here in Seattle and in King County. King County Equity Now, from across the spectrum there and different groups and organizations were able to speak passionately as to, their concerns and what they want to see pushed forward. The mayor came back and the thing is, and so here's the thing is I will say this is that the mayor reinforced a lot of things. And, heard it come out of her mouth, and she's the elected official. She's the chief executive. And, she reinforced a lot of things. And she also said that she feels that, they're trying to get closer, or they're close to a lot of what community is doing and everything else. So, it sets the stage here for a lot of follow-up. And I'll be honest with you, it's up to the citizen stakeholders in our city to hold all parties accountable, which is most important.
Well, it's also to our media to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable. We're the ones who can be there day in and day out when folks can't be. So I'm glad we have your platform, and I'm glad we have your platform, basically. I'm glad we have the Emerald. So.
Yeah, no, and it's indispensable. And I would say this is that this is a first step. I know that everybody, everybody wants everything in one shot. You know what I'm saying? Like even me, I want more out of tonight. More. How do we, whatever? We've been pushing this. We've been out there literally out there in these streets. And so, it would be disingenuous for me to say I want more, but I do know that this is what we started off as. This is a first step. This is a step that nobody else is taking from all the stuff that we've seen from back in May to right now. Nobody else has at least gotten everybody on the same platform. Nobody else has taken this wide audience that we have here and being able to give some insights into the Black community, Black elected officials and Black community members. There's a lot of people listening well beyond and viewing well beyond our neighborhood and our community that learned a lot tonight as to what's really going on.
And I'll be real. I mean, you know it, man. We didn't even get to 80% of the questions that we wanted to ask.
Man, that's why this is what I'm hot about. I'm brittle over here.
I was trying to hide my own disappointment in my face, but I'm not a good poker player, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, nah, man, you give it. People tell me I be making faces. I be like, man. I was like, look at Mark. I mean, because there's so much that's out there, man. There's so much, and I will say, you know, I guess the mayor, she's just ebb and flow on the time, because Friday we were supposed to get 20 minutes and we ended up going an hour. You know what I'm saying? And today, I mean, you know, the time just went long. I mean, it got away from us, but it got away in a good way, because people were able to express what it is that they wanted to get across to this very wide audience that's with us tonight.
In ways that I'm sure they felt they couldn't before.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, man. Is where else has our Black community and our elected officials been able to just speak ad nauseum about, man, what it is, the real issues that are impacting them and everything else on a wide platform? So in that, I'm very happy as to what's occurred tonight. I'm not upset about it. I'm just upset about time, because I know it's more questions to go, but that just means that we're just going to keep staying after it.
Right.
And it was nothing but positive combo, Marcus.
Yeah. I'll say I'm upset in the sense that I'm upset that LeBron didn't get a triple-double last night, right? He still won the game. And so, I mean, I'm sorry. You know, I had to work in my GOAT greatest of all time in it somehow. But yeah.
You know,
but no, there'll be many more conversations to have. And I will say this, like, I've lived in Seattle majority of my life, all of my wonderful 38 years, and there's never been anything like this before. And so to be able to be a part of it, I was just so honored to be with you, basically to be with you, Omari, to be able to do this is from a, you know, I'm just a kid from South Seattle. So to be able to be a part of this was amazing.
Just a kid from 29th and Jackson, James A. Garfield High School, CD or see me. You know what I'm saying? You already know.
Period. That's on period.
So I'll say this. I know we got to wrap up, and basically I know that you have to get on air and your overtime. I definitely, first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank Besa, KUBE 93, and Marcus Harrison Green. I want to definitely thank iHeart. You know, they gave us their radio stations today. You know, and I mean, that's not just a simple thing. They gave us their broadcast radio, they gave us their social media, because we said that we wanted the biggest platform possible for people in our community to be able to be heard. And so, you know, that's no small thing. So thank you to iHeart, KUBE 93, and the Hits. Thank you to Elysian, you know what I'm saying, for their support of this. Thank you to the Seattle Association of Black Journalists. And lastly, for us on this side, on the Converge side, man, I want to say thank you to all of our colleagues over here who continuously, man, you know, pushed it and pushed us. And lastly, to all the viewers out there who you guys will continue to support Converge. You guys are sending so much love and support. And it's because of you, our supporters, that we're able to continue to grow right in front of your eyes and to transform media here in Seattle.
Yeah.
Period.
And I just want to say quickly, oh, I love you, Besa. I love you. We don't say that enough, you know, in our community, at least publicly. And so I just want to say that to you all. I love you all. So thank you for tonight.
I love all the melanin on the screen. It's what
it's popping.
It's just the greatness.
It's popping. All right, y'all. Go.
Thanks for tuning in. Tune in to Besa at night.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
All right.